Okay. Call this meeting to order. Oops. Now he's set. Introduction of addendum items. Staff, any addendum items?
There's no addendum items this evening.
Okay. Confirmation of agenda. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Bruno, Councillor Desmarais. Any questions? All in favor? That's carried. Any disclosures of interest this evening? Presentation. Everybody received this evening an overview that Peter will take us. Peter will be looking for some direction as we move along. As the clerk said to me earlier, we do have an 11 o'clock timeline, but this is a lot of stuff to absorb, so I don't think I'll be taking us to 11 o'clock tonight. If we break early, we'll just do another meeting, which is no big deal. So, Peter, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So you do have, Council, I provided an agenda with regard to the general operating budget, the capital budget, and potentially storm sewer budget, and the BIA budgets for all approvals going between this meeting and any other future meetings. So I'll be taking you through, just quickly, take you through the base budget review, which is basically what we looked at the other night, and the summary just to bring us back up to speed. And then there's a number of items that will affect where we go on our tax levy, and they were all described and discussed at the Monday night's meeting. One being, we'll be looking, in order to move forward, we'll be looking for council approval or disapproval of the establishment of the storm sewer utility budget, because that actually affects our tax levy, whether or not we remove it from the tax levy or put it back in. Also, looking for council approval on the capital levy increase, the $257,000, or a different number if council so desires, and because that will affect, again, the tax levy. And then I'll sort of give a review of what the estimated average residential property tax would be. And then the sixth item is looking for approval of the funding of the Operations Center debt from the Fire Hall matured debt, because again, if we take that off the levy, it reduces the levy, and it would be covered through the existing debt that we have already in our budget. The seventh item I'd be looking for council approval is the funding allocations of the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund and the OCIF funds, and based on, again, the funds are subject to provincial allocation to the city. So once those are all done, and we also I always provide council a look at the grant programs that we do have, in case there's any changes that council wants to make there. And then we'll get into the unfinanced listing that, which is I think page 3 and 4 of your binder, and that's where we'll get into some decisions of council with regard to any other items that are affecting or may affect the tax levy, and we'll go through those, and staff are here to answer any questions with regard to any of their particular items, and then council will decide whether or not you want to add it to the levy or not, if it's something that council wants to do. And at the end of the day, then we'll take a look at anything that council does add or remove from the levy. Then we'll look at where we stand with regard to how it's affecting the property taxes. At the end of the day, once we get through all of that, which may be tonight, it may be the next meeting, we will then be looking for council approval of the overall operating budget. And again, it'll be subject to the provincial funding, because we don't know. I received a email yesterday, and they're actually giving us our first quarter payment, which is good, but it's subject to their reviews still. So we don't know what our full total amount will be for 2019. And if, with that said, whatever decisions we do make tonight, at least we will bring it to a certain point. And if the provincial government has any reductions to our grant, then we would come back to council, have another council meeting, and look at how that affects us and what decisions we may have to make at that point in time. I'm just going to review that tonight, because I think that's about all we're going to be probably working on tonight. The second page talks about capital budget and storm sewer budget and so on. So that would probably be more than likely another meeting. So if I can, Mr. Mayor, then just looking at the base budget, just as a quick review, page 9 to 35 in your budget package, and essentially what is that is provided to council, if you've gone through that, is what the changes were between last year's levy and this year's levy. So you can see there's a number of changes to revenues, some increased revenues, some revenues that had to be reduced because of different circumstances of not making or not receiving those types of revenues. And then there's all of the expenditure changes. Majority of the expenditure changes taking place in all of the schedules that I attached, which were provided to council, and identifies 4 years of actual expenditures for example, contract services, and providing an average for 4 years, and it provided to council last year's budget and this year's budget. So I don't intend to actually go through any of those because that's going through a budget line by line, and we'd be here till the end of this year. So what I would suggest to council is if, and that took us to a 3.68% levy increase. And if there's any particular questions that you had when you went through the binder, then we can look at those and have staff provide any answers to those questions. If not, then I'll just move on to the summary which we had looked at Monday night.
Okay, council? Set for that? Oh.
No problem.
Are you going to have a question, Councillor Desmarais, or you're just catching up to a page? Oh, thank you. Okay. Well, you had your hand up. I didn't know if you were looking for your notes. So, Peter, go ahead. Oh, sorry.
Can I just ask?
Yep, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, to Peter, could I ask you about the credit card fees, increased use of sales transactions, $10,000? Is that interest we're talking?
Three, Mr. Mayor. The credit card fees are the fees that we're charged from the credit card companies for customers using their credit card to pay marina slips, anything at Roselawn for the events at Roselawn, because we don't accept credit cards here at City Hall with regard to paying taxes and so on, because of the fact that the fees to us would be considerably higher. But we do provide that service for our ice rentals, those types of the user fees type of thing, and so there is a percentage charge that the city has to pay for processing all of the credit card payments.
Okay.
So what that tells you is that there's more and more
People
that are actually using their credit cards to pay for their ice rentals, the marina slips, and so on, which isn't a bad thing because we don't have to then run after for collections later on if we have to bill them. So it's a cost of doing business.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's actually not a bad number, Peter. I know what I paid.
No, it's
my
not a bad
office,
number.
It's
So we
way
actually
more
get a
than
pretty
that.
good rate.
So,
Yeah. Okay.
okay. Anybody else?
All right. If there's no other questions then, if you want to turn to page 2 of your budget package, which is basically what you saw Monday night. And as a summary, our levy increase being, our base levy increase being proposed is $629,000 increase, which is 3.68%. And what staff is proposing is the storm sewer budget, obviously, if that's approved by council this evening, and that's why that's the next item on our agenda. That reduction brings our base levy to 2.59%. And the next item is the actual operations debt, if we add that to our tax levy. And that's why that is also item 6, that if council decides, as was recommended Monday night, to fund that in a different way through an existing matured debenture, so the money is already in our budget that can pay for that, so we don't have to increase the levy. We can take that out. And then the capital levy is $257,000, which is 1.5% of our operations, and that is also on here for council's approval, or if council looks to change that dollar amount. With that said, our starting with the base budget increase, the operation center debt, and the capital levy increase, we're looking at a beginning balance of 4.76% before we get into the one-time expenditures. So that's just a sort of the overview, which you saw Monday night. So I would move to item 3, basically to discuss the storm sewer utility budget. Yeah. And if council is in approval, we would, or not, and we would need a motion on the table, Mr. Mayor, to either to remove it out, and if it's removed out, then those numbers still stand. If we have to put it back in, and that's not the direction of council, then obviously that will raise the levy increase.
Okay, so I'm going to start with that, Peter. So we're going to go to item 3, council approval to establish the storm sewer utility budget and remove the storm operations from the general tax levy. Is there any questions to staff on that? I'm not seeing any questions. Can I have a mover and a seconder to accept that? Councillor Wells, Councillor Desmarais. Any questions now? All those in favor? That's carried. So item 3 is carried at this time, Peter.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 4 would be the next item that, which is the capital levy increase. So it's as we discussed on Monday night, it's $257,000 or 1.5%, and we did increase that from a 1.25% last year in 2018's budget. And what that does is, if we continue that on, then we will have our fully amortized capital levy in 4 to 5 years.
Okay, thank you. Any questions to that before we look for a mover and a seconder? Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. I just want on the process here. This 1.50%, I understand what it's for. I'm supportive of the program of building that capital reserve. Because I don't know what the number is going to end up with, as well as there'll be an additional $100 charge that is not part of the tax rate. I just see that this may be an area that we might want to take a pause or partial pause on. I say that now. Not sure there will be, but it depends where we end. I just want to know that this is a number as well, if we pass it here at this point, that can be amended still.
Well, I'll answer that. Yes, it can.
Okay.
We're basically tonight giving Peter direction to move forward, but once the final budget comes back to us, then that's when you want to add, subtract, or whatever you want to do at that time.
Yeah. Thank you.
Peter?
What I may suggest, we could do that. What I may suggest is that we can hold off on the actual motion and council approval of this, and when we start looking at our levy items, at that point in time, it can be then discussed as to whether or not I can show the $257,000. Well, the $257,000 is showing on my spreadsheet. And if council decides to reduce it by a number, we can do it at that time, so you sort of see. And so we could actually have this approved when we look at the whole picture and approve it as a whole.
I have no problem with that, but if we can, maybe, because we've done this in the past, in my council days, we did take some consensus here so that Peter could add it, so that when he does show you that chart as we go forward, and you say, add this in or take this out, it'll show you what we're spending and what the cost is, or what the spending reduction and what the cost reduction is to the ratepayer. So we can, leaving it in now doesn't mean it's there, ladies and gentlemen. It doesn't mean it's there, but it does give Peter the foundation, so that when we're looking at our final budget and numbers, because there's a lot harder things to go through than putting this in. But again, as Councillor Bruno said, he could come back and say, you know, I think this is too high, too low, or whatever it may be. Make the 257 200,000 or whatever it may be. So by putting it in doesn't mean it's in until we actually pass the budget as one final document, but this will get us there. So if I could have consensus, is consensus to leave it in for now? Is that all right?
Sure.
Okay, so there you go, Peter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Based on that, I will draw your attention to page 6 of your council package. So just as a summary, I think basically we have page 6 and 6A, and at this point in time, I had mentioned, and we showed you this on Monday night, where with the capital levy increase and the operations center debt being levied also, that we're looking at about a 4.03% increase to the property tax. And remember, as I mentioned the other night, the property tax increase is different from the property or the tax levy increase. It's actually lower. So just bring that to your attention. So 6A is, and this is, I'm bringing this up because our next item deals with it. 6A essentially shows our base budget increase with just the capital levy increase and taking out the levy increase for the operations center debt and funding it from the matured debenture or debt that we already have in the budget. And with that said, the actual property tax increase reduces from 4.03% to 3.37%. And that would be my recommendation going forward, which takes us to item number 6, which is looking for council approval if you agree with my recommendation to fund that operation debt in that manner.
Questions? No questions? Can I have a mover to that? Councillor Wells, Councillor Bruno? No further questions? All in favor? That's carried.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, moving right along. Item number 7, council approval of the funding allocations. This is on page 7 and 8 of your budget package. And I just want to, for the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund, as you can see on page 7, the 2019 is established with $2,345,900 being applied to the tax levy, which is what we've applied for the last 6-7 years. And the additional funds that we have received from the provincial government, which was the $440,300 last year, I have the same amount in this year, and I've presupposed the budget based on that. But obviously, if that number gets reduced by the province, we're going to have to come back and revisit. But what I've done at this point in time is applied $100,000 to the downtown CIP and $340,000 to one-time projects, and that'll be the next thing that we will be getting into, is looking at how we spent that $340,000. Obviously, if the provincial government reduces, let's say, reduces $440,000, then we'll have to revisit that as to whether or not we want to do something different, which is 2 options. 1, we don't do what's on the list, or 2, we find other methods of funding it. And 1 being, if you remember on Monday night, of the allocation of the balance of the matured debt that we have, instead of it funding the fire department SCBA apparatus, that it funds some of the projects that council may want to do, and we'll just fund the SCBA in 2020. So, and I'll bring that back if we have to, type of thing. So I'll steer you through that. But at this point in time, I'm just looking for even a council consensus on this is the direction at this point in time that we'll be going, and then we'll get into the detail of that in a few minutes.
Okay. Does everybody accept that from Peter as consensus? Is that fine with everybody? Any questions? Okay, Peter?
The page 8 is the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund, or the OCIF funds, and these funds are guaranteed for us, $404,300, of which I have the allocation of $324,300 of that going towards the downtown CIP, and the other $80,000 to continue to fund our capital asset supervisor, as was approved through 2018's budget. So just looking for consensus that we move forward with that, with those funding.
Any questions to Peter on that? Consensus is fine, council? Okay, Peter?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And the last item that I always bring to council is item 8, which is on page 36 of your budget package. And what this is just an overview for council as to where we do provide funding to different groups, committees, and management agreements. And I just bring that to council for your review to ensure that council is still in agreement with the continued funding of these particular groups and committees.
Questions from council? Councilor Bruno?
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Mr. Sinez. So just so everyone's on the same page here, the community grant funds of $30,000 is garnered by the annual interest from the invested hydro funds, which is $19,000 plus $11,000 from investment. I thought it was the $19,000 that's from the investment, and the 11 is from general revenue. It's from a reserve. If I could get an answer to that.
Peter?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councilor Bruno. The interest is the $19,000 that was earned in 2018 to be spent in 2019, and the balance of the $11,000 to up the grants to $30,000. At this point, as I mentioned to previous council when this was passed, was that the investment of the $775,000 has been invested for a 5-year term, so there's about 3 years left in that term. In order to accommodate the additional $11,000, that those funds would have to come out of our general reserve and then be replenished at the point in time when the investment is matured.
Okay. If I could, Mr. Mayor, just being around for the inception of the fund itself, it's got to be at least probably 10 years. It started off with $80,000 a year, and it was funded solely by the then lease payments from the sale of our hydro. The 80 was also then managed by what was called Hydro Funds, the committee, and now is called the Grant Policy Committee. It's since been reduced from 80,000 to 30,000 for reasons that, to cut to the chase, there were not as many groups applying. The criteria that was set up by the fund was basically mimicked after bingo funds in Fort Erie, such that there was a group, rather than having 15 groups come here tonight and submit their requests, we dealt with it through this policy group, which is still in existence. Now that it is down to $30,000 and there are no more lease payments from CNP, one of the derivatives of the lease payment was an investment in a broadband company for which Port Colborne sold its share a couple of years ago, and a percentage of that, I believe it's around $750,000, $775, sits in an interest-bearing account that Peter suggested, and it would be the source of funding for the grant committee. The grant committee's policies and procedures, as you witnessed the other night with the flying group request for grant, allows organizations like that to submit an application to the grant policy committee whereby we can deal with it in a more in-depth way, look at their books, that kind of thing. And so that's what that policy committee does. That's the $30,000. And this one line is how it's funded. The grant policy committee needs a bit of a review in terms of the criteria for money. I think Councillor Demery sat on that with me, the former mayor, and 2 citizen members. It's still a committee of 3 council and 2 from the public. So that needs to be under review. $750,000 is a lot of money to tie up, gaining now 19%. So the amount of money is not that great. I think that it would be prudent to have at least the $750,000 available to this council for special projects, one-time spends, sit in our reserve for things that might come up, i.e. an emergency fund. Maybe we take some of it and we use it to try and create another Port Colborne fiber and do this kind of thing. The bottom line for me is that for the 30,000 or less to remain there, it should be funded out of the levy. That would free up the $750,000. And if we put like $8,000 to $10,000 a year in each year for the next 3 years, you would have a stable form of funding for the community fund. You could raise that, lower it a lot easier because it's fluid in the levy. And I think that you would have a greater sense of stability for that fund rather than a council of the day just extinguishing it and spending the money. So I'm going to be proposing that we take back the $750,000 into reserves, and this year add $10,000 in the levy, which is about, I think, about 1/18%, at least for the time being on the screen. And there may be some of these other grants that we would not fund, which would reduce that $10,000 in year 1. It's a complicated subject. If there's any questions to that pertains to the fund, I'll try and help answer that. But my motion would be that we begin funding the annual $30,000 slowly over time out of the levy. And it is a relatively small amount. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Seconder? Councillor Demery? Second?
I would second that. I would just, you're talking about only a portion of that this year, though. Okay, that's, I would say.
That fine? Seconder? Okay. Any questions to the councillor? You understand what Councillor Bruno's asking for?
Through you,
Make
Mr.
sure.
Mayor, so I believe what Councillor Bruno is asking is that $10,000 be added into the levy once we get to that point, added into the levy, and potentially 10,000 in 2020 and 10,000 in 2021 to reach the 30,000. And yeah, basically it's supplementing the interest that would be available at that point in time from the investment until the investment is matured.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions on that then? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? It's carried. You're set, Carrie, then? Okay. Peter?
Okay.
So you're going to go through this list on page 36? Is that what you're gonna do?
Well, I would say that if there's any other items on the list that council wants to raise, that they raise those now, and if not, then we would move on.
Okay, Councillor Demery?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Peter. Peter, when I look at the yearly allotments for the various committees, and I see the amounts in reserves, I've done this once before. A few years back, I asked that we take those amounts in reserves and take that back and put it in the general levy, because a lot of these committees are not spending it. Those committees without a plan to spend should actually be having that done again this year. That's what I'm hoping for anyway. When we look at here's an example. The Seniors Advisory Committee, there's $2,600 in reserves. I don't really think that's a true number. I think there may have been some spending that isn't here yet, is showing yet. I'm not sure, because we did ask that. I sit on that committee. We did ask what the number was. So somebody told us it was quite a bit less than that. But in any case,
Okay.
$2,600 in reserves with a $2,000 annual budget that isn't getting spent. That's why would we continually put it there if it's not being spent? So let's have use of that money somewhere else. That's just all I'm asking for. So, and there's a few of these where that applies. The volunteer committee has $10,500 that it's allotted yearly, and yet we're making a request somewhere else in the budget for volunteers to have a donation made to minor sports for their in return for their volunteering. Why would we not take it out of this budget? That's what this budget was created for, was retention, recruitment, and recognition. And that's what that is. That's retention, recruitment. So it should come out of there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Peter?
Through you to Councillor Demery. Yes, there are some of the committees that haven't spent all their funds. Obviously, Environmental Initiatives Committee, and I know Chris is on that committee, so he'd probably be able to speak to what their plans are.
Yep.
As to whether or not some of those reserves can be, we did that, I think, last year or two years ago.
Yeah.
Where if it was, we took a portion of those reserves, left a little bit in the reserves, but took a portion of those reserves and brought them back into the levy to fund the current amount that they're asking for.
Yeah.
The Accessibility Committee, I would say majority of that is
They have a plan.
They have a plan for their accessibility plan update. The Seniors Advisory Committee, I know, hasn't been very active, so there's a potential there. As far as the Volunteer Committee, the $10,500, I know that has been spent annually, that amount, so there is nothing in reserves. And majority of that goes towards the Volunteer Appreciation Night, is where the majority of the cost is applied there. So the $3,500, I think that it is that is being proposed for community groups to as a donation for volunteering and providing the service, because we're not getting as much volunteers, so they're trying to entice that as an incentive. I think if you take that out of the $10,500, then it may have an effect on your Volunteer Appreciation Night, because that's where a lot of the cost, I think, is.
It could well. What I'm thinking is that we should be reviewing that. That's what I wanted to see happen. We should review it. If the number needs to be higher for in the committee sense, let that be there, but rather than have a special ask for one sector. So just to review it. And the same with the others. If they have a plan, then we should leave that money alone. But if they don't have a plan, that money needs to come back into the general fund.
Yep. And for the Volunteer Committee, that is the plan, to continue with the Volunteer Appreciation Evening, and that's where the majority of that $10,000 is spent on that particular
Yeah, I think
event.
it's around $7,000, correct?
Somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And then obviously there's like T-shirts that are bought and for volunteers and so on that make up that $10,000. So I know over the last.
So those no longer come out of the Canale's budget then?
No, I believe the
Wow.
T-shirts. So do you know all?
Go
Thank
ahead.
you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, the volunteer committee's budget is largely used up for the volunteer recognition evening. In fact, I think last year we were rather close to using the entire budget for the event itself. And there is a small portion of the budget that's used for promotional materials, so what we call swag, for recognizing the volunteers.
Okay,
Okay, Councillor?
that's fine. I just want to make a point of that, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Councillor Bruno?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I noticed I just noticed this actually. Back when that grant committee had started, there were some organizations that we were funding every year. In particular was the Pokemon. Great organization, needs it for their insurance. But we were treating it as a permissive grant, which means they'd apply every year to the grant committee and they could say yay, nay, or knock the number down. It seemed apparent that we were just approving that every year. When you're doing that, you should put it in the levy, because it's not discretionary. We all want their insurance paid. We all want the Pocomar there. So the Pocomar was brought over and put into the levy, because it was never going to be a discretionary issue. Feral cat program at $5,000 did come to the committee every year. And that program, like any other applicant, had to show its books, had to show whether it was doing well outside of needing a hand up. And for whatever reason, certainly in my absence here, it has now become part of the budget, and it doesn't come to the committee, and so there is no oversight as to whether, I don't know whether the Feral Cat Committee has $100,000 in the bank or is skint and can't do anything. But when an organization comes to the committee, there's that introspective time. They hand in their books, they make their case, they fill out an application, they have a board of directors, all of that comes forward. So I'm confused as to why it's here. And so I'm assuming the council of the day felt that it should not be a permissive grant and it would just be automatically given the $5,000 every year without that level of oversight. And so I would suggest that it used to come to the grant committee. It was looked at favorably. It always got what it requested. But we had an annual look at their books. And I think that's the proper place for it, rather than here. So I would be moving that they come to the committee each year. We have $30,000. I think we could, it's the end of the month, I think we could give them some time to come and apply. And I think if their case is as good as it's always been, we haven't even in the last year or two spent the full 30 that we have. So that would be my recommendation.
Okay, we have a mover, have a seconder. Councillor Bagu. So to remove the 5,000 from the levy and put them over to the grant program, or tell them they can come through the grant program, is what Councillor Bruno has asked for. Any questions to that? Questions? Councillor Demery.
Just one question. Would they get ample notification so that they could still get in with their yearly program? Because they do have to, they work with the local vets and just to be able to get there.
I think the deadline is January 31st. We need to extend that for them.
I would, that's what I was going to ask, is if we
That's
could
fine.
make an extension for them because we're changing things.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
We'll work with staff on that. Nancy, that's actually comes through Nancy's office, so we'll work with Nancy on it. Okay. All right. Any other questions on that one? No? To that?
No.
Well, then we haven't even voted on it, so do you want to wait? Okay, so everybody understands that we're removing the 5,000 and directing that group to come to community grants. Okay, all those in favor? All those opposed? That's carried. Okay, Peter, you got that one?
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Okay, I had Councillor Beauregard next.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Peter. I just want to focus our attention to the Heritage Port Colborne Committee. So from my understanding, that committee has undergone some change. That committee is going to be a subcommittee of the Historical and Marine Museum Board. So are those funds going to be allocated there with them?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, currently that particular section of the budget is under planning. And if it's going to be part of museum, then it's just a matter of taking that section of the budget and putting it under museum, if that's who's going to have the approval of spending the funds through the Heritage Board. So I would say the funds will stay there. It's just a matter of who's going to be overseeing the spending of those funds.
Okay.
Okay, so Peter, those funds were specific to heritage properties, and there is a cost for that.
Correct.
So if it continues, it will come through, well, be directed through the subcommittee of the museum.
Correct.
So we need it in the budget, and then we'll just leave it up to Peter's department to reallocate it to the proper department then, because it's no longer on its own. Does everybody understand that? Okay. Any further questions? Councillor Bruno.
Just back to the issue I had raised with the feral cat. I'm not gonna deal with that. I guess what I'm saying is, so the 5,000 that we just put over to them coming towards, to the committee, now makes my previous ask for 10 down to 5. So that, will that be reflected by the time you post it?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. You're talking about in the community grants portion that we did already?
Yes.
Okay.
And just finally on that, I mean, I sit on this, but we haven't had our first meeting. It's my understanding that the Niagara Airport Commission 22,545 may be no longer in 2020 because the region is taking over both airports.
No. Can I answer that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because we met yesterday.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we had a meeting. So, yes, the region is looking at the 2 airports would be operated under one authority, but there will still be an ask from the communities. So that hasn't been determined how that will work. So whether it's just on the general levy across the region, or they'll go to the communities that were involved currently. So until that comes out, I think you've got to leave it in there, because that hasn't changed.
Sure. Oh, no, I wasn't
Yeah.
talking about this year.
So, and it may not be in 2020 either, or, yeah, 2020 either. So, we're meeting with Mr. Tripp yesterday, that is coming forward.
Just on that?
So it could come through this year, and then the outcome of what happens and how they're gonna fund it, then they'll come back to us with that, with regards to what transpires.
I can
Yes,
ask this at a
Council.
regular council meeting, but I would hope that currently, between Niagara Central Airport, or this one, and the one in St. Catharines, not all 12 municipalities
Correct,
fund.
correct.
Do you know if that will be
We don't know.
redistributed yet
We don't know yet.
amongst all 12?
That hasn't been determined.
Okay, thank you. So this could go down, if all 12.
Oh, could very well, or they just may put it in the regional budget. So it's just a different way of us paying for it, it's still gonna be paid for.
Okay,
But it would come, it could come off our levy,
got it.
okay? So, Councillor Butters and I will be working at the regional with regards to that issue. And both her and I have sat on that board previously, so we do have some knowledge of what's been going on with that. Yes, Councillor Bogart?
Yep. Through you, Mayor, to Peter. What, I'm just looking at it and I see the Niagara South Plowmen's Association, $50. What's that for, if you don't mind me asking?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's been a long-standing donation, basically, to the Plowmen's Association. Every year they have their antique show or whatnot, and they usually just, we've always been a donor, and they always send us a letter asking for us to continue to provide them the funds. $50. It's not a lot of money, and we've always left it in the budget. We've never increased it, but we've never removed it, and it's sort of a token of Port Colborne's participation in the program.
Okay,
Yeah, I think we get an ad in there,
okay,
in the program.
just curious.
Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. Councillor Cloud?
Mr. Mayor, to Peter, could I ask you regarding the BIAs? Why the difference in the two, downtown versus the Main Street BIA
Peter?
funding?
Mike, where's Mike? There is, with all of the, I believe it's with all of the additional, what do you call them, Chris? All the decorations, the banners, the large large pots with all the trees in them, and that, although the maintenance of all of those is, we don't have those in the downtown area. So a lot of the maintenance costs of I believe the plantings and so on are there for all of those planters that's all along Main Street. So we have a couple down in the downtown area, one out here on a couple here outside, but the majority of them are on Main Street, so that's where the majority of the cost is.
Okay, Councillor? Thank you. Councillor Bagia?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Pokemart, I know it's a very valuable resource for the city, but I'm just, because I don't know their financial situation, how they work and everything else, is the money we give of them as is that, do you know what percentage of their total budget that is, or is that their total budget?
Peter?
Through you, Mr.
You want to give a
Mayor.
little explanation then for
Yep.
the council?
Sure, through you, Mr. Mayor. The Pokemar, they, in the past, they've always come to us. Most of the funds that we provide them is to cover their insurance costs of operating. They don't really receive much funding from the federal government, or from most of their funding comes through their own fundraising activities. And so they do come to Port Colborne. They house in our marina, and they also have come in the past to council looking for capital funds for new engines, new boats, and things like that. But council of the past has always said, no, that's something that you have to fundraise, you have to deal with. But we do realize and recognize the importance of Pokemar out on our lake and for our boaters. And therefore, I've always consistently provided them with enough funds to at least cover their insurance costs, because that's a big part of their budget. And we normally increase it by the cost of living of 2.5% over the last few years. And the other additional item that they do receive, we started, I believe 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, I can't remember, but I think maybe about 3 years ago, is charging I think it's a 1% fee on the seasonal boaters, because basically they're the ones out in the water majority of the time. And so we charge that additional fee on our seasonal, and whatever we receive for that, which is about $4,500, we then turn that over to Pokemar. It's a sort of a standard fee that that they would use as part of their operations.
Counselor?
Okay, thank you very much. Just, as long as we're on the water, can I ask another question about the Lighthouse Group? I know we're getting involved somehow with the Lighthouse Tour Group. Does that come under community grants, or is that something separate that's going to happen later, or?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe any granting that's going to Lighthouse is going through the granting committee.
Okay. Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Demery?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to whoever can answer this question, I noticed that we have high school scholarships, and I know that we give to both Lakeshore and to Port High. And then I see the physician recruitment scholarship. Do we do that to both schools, or is it just to one? I know that I presented one to Port High in the last grad, so I'm just wondering, do we do both schools?
Peter?
In the past, this is actually a new item, I believe, for the first time last year, if I'm not mistaken, that they added this as an incentive for physician recruitment. And to be honest with you, I can't remember if it was split between the two or how that scholarship went out. Who's on the physician? Do you know?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Demery, I don't have that information at my disposal at the moment, but what I can do is bring it back to the next council meeting, budget meeting for you, and report back.
That'd be great. I just want to make sure that we're being fair, and if we're not currently doing it, could we please do it?
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
If you can just, Ashley, if you can just email us the next day or so, then Angie can bring forth a motion for that at the next meeting if need be. Councillor Bruno?
Thank you. Just on Councillor Demery's, I'm on the physician recruitment committee. I think it was both, but I'm not sure either. It surprised me that it's here and not part of our budget, because we have a fairly significant budget. It's $500. Seems like the $50 one, it just sort of stands out there, but I'm not so sure why it wasn't funded by our committee and our
Okay,
fund.
we'll let Ashley bring that information to us shortly, and then we can formulate more questions if you want. Anything else? Okay, anything else on this page, page 36? Councillor Borgard?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Begu. I volunteered with Pokemar in the past, so I do understand that they rely heavily on this type of money, and they have become very, very busy on our waters as of late, and has continued, so I can just speak to them requiring these type of funds.
Okay. Peter, just a question on that quickly. Through our boat ramp, is there like a dollar per launch or 50 cents per launch that would go towards this too? Or is it, or nothing?
Towards Pokemar, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, like the boaters.
Transit.
So my boat is docked at the marina and a portion of my fees go towards the $4,500, which is fine. I truly believe in that as a boater, lifelong boater in this community.
Yeah.
Because Pokemar is just more than whoever has a boat in our marina. They go a long way. But do we take a small chunk of a boat ramp fee to go towards it too, or no?
To my knowledge, no.
Okay.
I can confirm that with Mark, and he confirms no. So, no, it's only on the seasonal boaters.
Okay.
At this time.
Yes, Counselor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, I'd just like to speak to that one. I was under the impression that we were going to be taking that off, but we did have that discussion at council, and said that we would take certainly the seasonal package, whatever they pay, they'd pay a certain percentage to help the Pokemar. But I was under the impression that we would do a launching fees too, and I thought it would be a good idea if we also added Nickel Beach and anything that has to do with the water. If you're accessing the water, you need to pay a portion toward
Okay,
that.
so before we go any further, Mark, can you come up to the podium, please?
I mean, if you're using the water, there's potential rescue. Pokemar needs to have that.
Yeah, we just got to make sure that, because there are some things that on the water that they don't do. No, but there are certain things. The beach might not be it, because they can't get in close enough. The fire department may look at. Where's my fire chief? Chief, if you want to come up too, only because this does tie in. So if something's coming forward, we have the right information. So Mark, can you just address what the councillor spoke about and what this past council discussed?
Yes, so through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Desmarais, the history with the boat ramp not being involved in the Pokemar fee was because it's a set rate, it's $15, and we felt that was already at the high point. So it's a $15 rate, and it was a pay and display machine, so it was hard to add 1% onto that to go onto the Pokemar fee. Yes, we could take 1% at the end of the year and put it towards a Pokemar fee, but we didn't do anything with the boat ramp because of those set rates at $15 per launch and being a machine that's taken that way.
To Mark, yeah, go ahead.
Mark, would you know how many, because there's seasonal, there's the launch, and then there's transient slips at the marina. Do you know how many transient nights you sell in a year?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just emailed this a couple weeks ago, and I can, if I get my phone, I can tell you exactly what it is.
Sure.
But I believe it was, I don't want to make a announcement just out of the blue, but I do have that number and I can get that to you.
Okay, we'll let you look that up.
Okay.
You've got a question to Mark?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, before that, just, Chief, if you could pop up while Mark's looking for that. Can you just so we know as far as water rescues that your department may take on and what Pokemar does, just so we know where the line is drawn, because if really somebody coming onto the beach in their car for a day, Pokemar may never be affected by them in the normal usage unless they're in a little raft that goes way out or something. Can you touch base?
Your Worship, that's correct. The fire service provides shoreline rescue. We normally go to 300 feet from shore, but we have extended that length in the past, in particular in Shirkston. There's a number of drownings there on an annual basis, unfortunately. So the Nickel Beach area, we would be the ones that would probably get initially called. Normally, we activate the Coast Guard, which then in turn activates Pokemar if we think it's beyond our reach relatively early in the situation, depending on the communications with dispatch. Once we go on there, they let us know where the person is or may not be, if they're on a raft, those types of things. We normally get them on the go pretty quickly.
Okay, and then your working relationship is obviously very good between our department and Pokemar.
That's correct. Yeah, we use their services on a regular basis. Actually, every time we go to Shirkston, they're almost always activated. As long as it's not in the quarry, if it's in the lake, we certainly use them on a very regular basis.
Okay, thank you. Take your time, Mark. We want the right answer. Councillor Wells?
Through you, Mayor, it's not regarding this one here, but.
Yeah, turn your mic on.
Through you, Mayor, to either Chris or Peter. In regards to the Bethel Community Center grant, I noticed in the package there is some additional reserves for capital improvements that were not spent from the 2016 budget.
Peter?
And my question to you, Peter, is that how does that impact this grant as this is identified as capital improvements as well?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the grant that they do receive, both the Bethel and the Sherkston Community Center, is a grant for that they can either use on operations or some small capital improvements that they may require at the facility. Any major capital improvements such as the roof, accessibility, doors, things like that are the responsibility of the city. And part of the capital grants that has been allocated to Bethel Community Center are for completion of new roofs for that facility, along with a number of other facilities that I believe an RFP is going to, Sherkston is going to be going out for this year to complete a lot of the roofs within a lot of the facilities in the city. So the the grants that they do receive are, I think the majority of it they do spend on covering their operating costs for the maintenance costs and hydro utilities, all those types of things, and then some minor capital improvements that they may have.
Counselor?
So taking it from there, where's the cutoff on whether we classify it as a capital improvement or non-capital improvement?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the in the agreements, I believe it's stipulated in the agreements, anything that's to do with the facility itself, like for example, the roofs, for example, if it's a faucet that has to be changed, they would be responsible for that. So it's a matter of depending on the extent of it and how large of a capital improvement it is. But for the major part of the building itself, or the exterior of the building, or the parking lot, because we've done some, I think at Sherkston we shared in a cost with them on the paving of the parking lot at one time. So it's an agreement that the discussion takes place between the community group or Bethel or Sherkston and the city as to who's going to be responsible for what. But for the most part, anything that's major, like the furnace, any major components of the building,
Water wells, we've done the wells with the systems
the wells
in the past.
we were responsible for, is the responsibility of the city.
Counselor?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Bruno, Mark, you didn't find it?
I couldn't find it, of
That's
course.
fine.
That's my luck.
So Counselor Bruno?
But I will give it, I'll say roughly what I think the number is, and I can email you tomorrow what the actual numbers are. But I believe we had 800 boats stay there this year, and the total was something around close to 2,000 nights in total.
Thank you.
Counselor?
Mayor, I think your idea of you know, should those other two service areas, launch and transient pay, is one that should be examined. But I think I've spoken to the director. I think there's a whole issue of things we had as our first meeting, the sustainability issues of the docks down at the marina. So I think that these issues, you know, rate reviews, all those things might be best done as either a subcommittee or with the director working on that and coming back with, this council probably should, in my view, because it is a profit center, and we've got questions on that, probably a look at what the business plan is there and put one together. Perhaps that can come at a later date to deal with Pocomar too.
Definitely, or it could even be put over to next year's budget, because it's not a pressing issue at this time, and then at a regular meeting of council, you can formulate a motion to be brought forward to go forward with what you were asking. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Oh, to Mark? Okay, thanks. Councillor Baggy.
Regarding the launch ramp, the fee that people pay What's the breakdown in the total amount? I know the region owns some property. I know that somebody has to come check the vehicles to see if they have their little tag on them. And I know you have in the budget for a new machine coming up, replacing one of the machines. I just want to know, does the region get money out of this lawn tramp too, or where's the money go?
Okay, yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bagu. All the money from daily sales, and we do sell seasonal sales, seasonal ramp passes, which include senior ramp passes. It all goes into our revenue, into the marinas boat ramp revenue. There's nothing for the region there. And then by law enforcement does do the patrols and see if everyone does have a ticket on their boat or a sticker on their boat trailer. And roughly in those numbers, I believe we are seeing more seniors purchasing the boat ramp pass than the regulars. So, and the seniors, we say is 55 years and older. So I think
put
those
up,
numbers,
I'm 56 and I'm not a senior.
that's 55 years and a senior to me, but I think it was, we did about 100 regular passes and something like 280 senior passes. So that's kind of and the rest were all daily passes.
You don't think a non-senior could be using that pass?
I know for facts they are.
The reason I'm asking is I've been known to go down there for a coffee or two, sometimes early in the morning, and watch the fishermen go out, and there's always a set little group down there sometimes, and discussions arise on the region's taking all the money for here, and it's a region this, region that, and so now I can give them the real answer.
You're talking about the fake news people? Is that what you're talking about? Okay, any other questions to Mark? Thanks, Mark. Thank you, Chief. Okay, Peter.
All right, so now council can get into some of the nitty-gritty of the staff requests that come forward. So these are on your revised page 3 and 4 that I provided to you on Monday evening. And they'll be brought, and I'm going to be bringing them up on the monitors also. So what I suggest, Mr. Mayor, if you please, any of the items that I have identified as affecting the tax levy, that those items be discussed individually. And once we get through those particular items, we'll obviously see where we are sitting as a tax levy increase. And then if there's any of the other items that are funded in other ways, like the OMPF funds or reserves, if there's any there that council or any councillors want some further explanation, then staff are here to provide those answers. So,
so then, Peter, just to be clear, so anything under the levy funding list is what you want to discuss first?
Correct. So what I've done so far, Mr. Mayor, is based on council's decisions thus far, council has approved the Operations Center debt, the $114,000, to be funded out of existing funds that are in the budget of the matured debt. So I've removed that from the levy. So I've reduced the levy by $114,094. The community grants, Councillor Bruno's motion to increase community grants by $10,000, I've added. And the motion to remove the feral cat grant for $5,000 and advise them to go to the grant committee. That has been reduced on the tax levy, $5,000. So those are those particular items. So the things we've done so far are now included here.
Okay.
And basically what that does is takes us from our original 4.76% tax levy to 4.25% tax levy. And in addition to that, what I would say is that with regard to an average property tax, the increase is 3.5%.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so council, under page 3, under the levy funding column, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 items on page 1, and 3, 5, 11 on page 2. Does anybody have any questions with regards to those only that are under the levy funding?
What I would suggest, Mr. Mayor, is first thing I'd like to say is the first item, which is the remuneration, that is included. I've added that to the levy. That is a federal change. So in order to keep the equations at the same level, then that's the additional cost. So I have that added into the levy, so we don't really have to go through that particular item. What I would suggest is we can go through each of the individual items. So the first one, Mr. Mayor, is the $85,000 for the community safety. And what we can do is have council discussion on each of these points as we go down as to whether or not council wants that amount in the levy or a different amount in the levy.
All right, that's no problem. So you guys want to go through line by line on those levy items? Okay, so does everybody, the remuneration portion, everybody understands how that's come about?
Yep.
That has to do with all the taxing and everything that the feds changed. So the council's not making more money, you're making the same amount of money. It's just that we have to do it differently. Community safety, sorry, yes, Councillor?
Can I just ask a question regarding the remuneration for
Certainly.
council? So the federal government reduced it, and
Well, they changed the taxing.
they changed
Of
the
how we're
tax
taxed.
basis. And their suggestion was that we do what we're doing to make it be the same, or did they give you, or were they just feeling we pay more taxes and that was it?
Peter?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. It's an item that's obviously up to council as to how you want to approach it. With the 1/3 tax exemption lost from councillors, and basically it reduces your net pay basically. So you're working for a heck of a lot less for what you're already working for, which is minimal. So basically what it's doing is it's taxing you on those dollars. So with that, there's an additional cost on benefits, OMERS, Canada Pension Plan, and so on. So with that said, in order to level out the salary or wage that council will receive, net pay, there's an additional cost in order to do that. And that's what this cost would do, is basically put council back on the same level of remuneration.
So councillor, it averages out to $1,270 per councillor and mayor. That's how it averages out. So there's no change in the stipend from the past, it's just because of this taxing issue the feds did. It puts us in the same position we were at prior to the tax change.
Thank you.
Okay, yes, councillor?
Regarding the same thing, is there not a compensation committee that decides these numbers for city council?
No. Well, no, there's not.
Yeah.
What there will be is how this came about, so I'll give you a little history. The first go-around, Councillor Bruno was the councillor rep that was there for a sounding board. The second go-around was Councillor Desmarais, who was there for a sounding board only. It was a totally public committee that came back, talked about ward boundaries, talked about the number of councillors, and talked about what councillors and the mayor were paid. The first go-around, the real big issue that came out of that from that committee, after doing a series of meetings across the city in each ward, they increased our pay and said that it should go up each year by the rate of inflation. That's how that came about, and that goes back quite a few years.
That's the one I was on.
2008.
I've only ever been on one with Gary.
Oh, it was the two? Sorry, oh, I apologize, I thought we did, because I know we did it twice then. So, but that was the one you were on, yeah. So those councillors were there after, that was the only recommendation basically that came out of that committee. They didn't want to change ward boundaries, they didn't want to change the composition of council. That was the only recommendation based on their public meetings and what they did getting together. And as I said, the councillors didn't have a vote, they were just there for questions. Councillor Bruno.
Just to add to that, Councillor Bego, at the time, I think approximately 8 years of councils before that meeting, it must have been the early 2000s, there had been no cost of living and the councillor stipend had frozen. When the committee came into existence, it looked at us as a comparison, and we had fallen behind, mostly by the rate of inflation, for about 8 years. So there was a one-time increase to make up for the non-cost of living, and then it was just that there would be a cost of living increase only.
Yeah, but I gotta talk about that first, because there's another meeting that's gonna lead into that. Okay, then I'll lead into you. Okay, Counselor? So with this, as far as resurrecting that a public committee going forward, next week I'm meeting with the 12 mayors, are meeting with regards to the province coming down with what they want to do. So I think we should wait, have the mayors meet, because we really want to go at this as 12 communities on what we tell the province with regards to their amalgamation and all that stuff. So they want us to gather our information here and go at it as 12 mayors to the two gentlemen that are doing the review of all these regions across Ontario. Instead of us going hokey pokey, we really want to take our combined things forward. So we'll be coming back to council with regards to this. So, but it's a very short window. So depending on what the province does, I mean, we won't know that, but we have to have this done by June, around the 1st of June or the middle of June. So you have a question, Councillor?
I do, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to make sure that, the public knows that there will be a committee struck. Council has directed it, the past council did direct it, people are expecting it. We need to follow through with that, and I do understand the need to get this piece of business out of the way first. I do understand that, but basically they need to know that for their city, the city they pay their taxes to, we're going to take care of their requests. So.
And I know that the clerk has just whispered in my ear, so that I'll look to the clerk for some more information.
Yeah, so you're probably wondering, because you remember from the previous council, there was a direction to the clerk to form this committee after the election. So we did put it out there and try to form the committee, but we had very limited response from the public. So we're going to take a new approach, evaluate it, and get public input. And now with this added component from the province, probably look at the terms of reference a little bit before we implement it. So you will see it come forward, hopefully within the next 6 months.
Yeah, because really I want to bring back what some other communities may be doing with this and how we're going to proceed. So a lot of this can go hand in hand, but let's get some answers first. I mean, we do have to move quickly on the review, provincial review issue, because we have to, so if we decided as a council to change makeup of ward boundaries and how many people sit around the horseshoe here, what is our cutoff date for that prior to the next election, approximately? We 2 years out, or?
I'm not confident with my answer. I apologize, but I believe it's at least a year before we need to do it.
At least a year. Yeah. So next election. Yeah. So if we delay it a little bit right now, it's not going to hurt us.
It's true. I just want this to.
Yeah. No. And I think in speaking with the clerk on this, I think we only had one person put their name in, to be quite honest. So we will be doing a very good job, but I think we have to bring more information forward, because we may put more duties into what that group looks at going forward.
Which should be a good idea. I'm really glad that the clerk did respond to it, because this will allow it to be out in the public and they know exactly what the holdup is, and public participation had everything to do with that.
Correct.
So that's very important.
Because aside from the province, the way we've done it in the past has worked very well for us. And we do appreciate those that volunteered at those times. So, any more on the council remuneration? Seeing that, community safety, Peter, the 85,000?
Yep, through you, Mr. Mayor. This was a memo that was brought forward by the CAO to council, which was put in your package. It's to deal with the safety issues in the downtown area. And the committee that was struck basically was requesting that an amount be put into the budget to look at ways of safety initiatives within the area, and in particular security cameras, those types of things. So 85,000 is 0.5% of the levy. I think it was suggested 1% of the levy be put aside. But then it was suggested that for the first year, because you probably won't get to it for, by the time budget is over and that, you're looking at about a half a year. So $85,000 is a 0.5%. And it's a matter of whether or not council is willing to put that into the levy or a different amount.
Peter, with the recent opting in of the cannabis retail, you know, we know we're not going to have a retail store for a while now, based on how they're rolling this out. With the funding that comes with that, and the caveats that the province will tell us where we can use it, in what I've read, community safety could be a part of that. So should we, although right now I'll leave the 85 there, but maybe we can supplement that with those funds throughout our community, which is what they're geared for, so that instead of being at some point 0.5% of a levy increase, it could be slightly lower depending on the final number of those funds and how those funds have to be distributed within the municipality.
So it's, to you, Mr. Mayor, the $13,000 that we've received now, and potentially an additional $5,000, because we opted in, it's more than likely going to be higher than that. Those funds are, as you know, are specific to the enforcement with relation to cannabis, whether it's by law enforcement, fire enforcement, those types of things. Could be for security cameras, those safety reasons also, I would imagine. So the 13,000 will be set aside for that. And I think what you're saying is, can you reduce this by the amount of money that we're getting to sort of supplement it that way? It's just, yes, you can.
Okay.
It's just that we have to ensure that the money that we do receive from the province is specific to cannabis.
That's correct, yes. So, Councillor Demeray?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a couple of questions on this. First of all, I really thought this might be a one-time ask because it was for security cameras and some trial things. Because we don't know going forward what the costs are going to be. And secondly, reading about the money coming from the province to do with retail cannabis, what I was reading was that those funds could be applied to security measures such as this at such time as an operation was in place.
Yeah.
So, and we've got several years before that's going to be. So I think that would be a problem. We can't offset it now. We need to look at what these dollars are now, what they're going to be for. But I'm a little leery about putting them in the levy, that amount, because I really don't feel that that's going to be a yearly amount that we're going to need to look at. And you know, once things get in the levy, they tend to stay there. So I would rather see this be a one-time ask. Just my feeling on that.
Okay. Councillor Bruno?
To that, but I don't know if the memo didn't clarify it for me, if there's a way to cut out what is that ongoing expense, because I would agree with Councillor Demery. I mean, the things that I heard discussed are capital items, and I don't know why we wouldn't pay for them one time, but the operation, the maintenance, the monitoring, if it's cameras, should be operational.
Yep.
And in the levy. So 0.5% is without a plan, without it itemized, is a fairly significant amount without any detail.
Okay, so move it to one-time funds. Councillor Clayla?
I agree with what Councillor Bruno is saying, Mr. Mayor. I look at this and I see $85,000, and I attended all of those meetings this past summer, and all we heard was how cameras weren't helpful, all the different things that weren't helpful. I don't think that they've come up, or we've come up with a plan yet to figure out what it is exactly that we need to do. And we're not just talking downtown here, we're talking, you know, Ward 2, we're talking the whole town, we're talking everywhere. So I think that we need to come up with a plan before we kind of allocate dollars to say, I know taxpayers will look at this and say, $85,000 for what? It might buy 2 cameras, they could be broken in one night. And then we're looking at the ongoing costs, like you said. I think we need to come up with a plan first before we move ahead. And if we have to come up with the funding, then maybe it comes out of reserves for this year until we can figure out how we need to do it in future. But to tack it onto the levy now, I think that we're kind of jumping the gun here. We haven't heard what the police can do either. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Counselor. So consensus to move to one time? Peter?
May I suggest, Mr. Mayor, that what we do is move this to defer funding, and with the explanation or caveat subject to a plan that may come into place, and if there's capital items, for example, if you have to spend $20,000 on cameras or whatever it may be, that for this year that come out of the capital reserve, and then to be determined as to what operating costs may be involved, and then that would have to come into the 2020 budget.
Perfect. Counselor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do believe, though, a big part of this money was to speak with a consultant, a security expert, that would be able to assess the city and tell us what we need and where things would be most effective. So in that case, that wouldn't really be the best place for the money. I'm still going along with the one-time ask. I think that would work best for us.
Okay, so we have a one-time ask. Councillor Demery, is there consensus to put it into a one-time ask? Counselor?
Mr. Mayor, I understand the one-time ask. I guess I'm not a big fan of consultant fees. I think that we can figure a lot of this out ourselves. I know that we need experts on certain things, but I think we heard from a lot of the experts. We heard a lot of talk from a lot of citizens. I think that we do need to study it more, but I just think that looking at it, we need to have a close relationship with our police. We need to be talking with them. We need to be looking at what's going on. I live right downtown. I live in the middle of a lot of what went on last summer. And I just think that to say $85,000, I don't want to spend any of it on a consultant if we don't have to. But I think we need to have those conversations first before we decide that we're going to move ahead in that direction. We need to come up with a plan, and then maybe it is to get a consultant. But I think that to just say have a consultant first, I would not vote for that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. So now that I don't have consensus, we'll put a motion on the floor, please.
Or we could wait for Mr. Louis to come back and speak to it, because he's the one making the request.
Okay, so we'll just defer for tonight? Defer this one for tonight, and then when Scott's back, yeah, is that all right then? We'll just defer this to discussion at our next budget meeting? Oh, make sure you turn your microphone on when you're talking.
Okay, that would work. We could defer that.
Okay.
For Scott Louis to come back and he could speak to it.
Okay.
Because this came out of the committee that was struck to deal with the issue, and the experts are the ones who advised that we hire a security consultant.
Okay, all right, on that issue? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I noticed that the 0.5% that they're asking for is actually not, they essentially want to go to 1%, so that's going to increase. But yes, I would agree with deferring and listening to more to what their CAO has to say.
Okay, can I take consensus on that?
Deferring?
To wait till the CAO is back? You guys all right with that? You guys all right with that? Okay. Okay, Peter, we'll bring that back when
Yep, that's fine.
Mr. Louis is back. Thank you.
Sure.
10,000 records management annual license fee?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the $10,000 annual license fee, that's with regard to the records management and retention system and the agenda management. And that we have $80,000 in the reserve to implement that. And once that's implemented, which will be this year, is that there's an annual license fee for the software. And so $10,000 would be that. And I'm anticipating that if it's going to be an annual thing, it's going to have to go into the tax levy.
Okay, is that all right with everybody? Questions? No questions? Okay, Peter, the 9,500 for the summer student?
The 9,500 for the summer student, this is for corporate services, so this is for actually the first floor. There's a memo that was written by Amber, our city clerk, with regard to the reasons for the summer student. And if I miss anything, Amber, speak up. Basically what happens is with the staffing In the summertime, we have a lot of vacations and so on. If there's people could possibly off sick and that type of thing, it gets pretty chaotic on the first floor with regard to coverage during the summer months. And so we're looking to anticipate to have a summer student for the first floor to cover for those types of things, vacations times during the summer, and also to provide for some relief in doing some other duties within corporate services and within clerk's department, and especially since we're going into this records management system this year, this person would help in doing some of the filing and system and the records management system and getting it implemented along with some of our permanent staff. So that's what we're looking to provide. Did I cover it all, Amber, or is there anything else that you want to add?
You're all set? Okay, any questions to that? So we're gonna leave that there?
It would also help with our customer service on the first floor, is what we're looking for.
Okay, so
Which
nothing to that? So,
ties in
okay,
next
Peter, 34,000 for customer service, part-time staffing?
So the next item is something that's been discussed recently. Obviously, as you know, we've automated our switchboard. We've had some complaints with regard to how that system's working. So there is a plan in place that I know the mayor and CAO and Amber have been looking at other municipalities, other ways of providing customer service through the phone system, and a way to ensure that we are answering the phones for customers calling in, and then providing the customer service from start to finish, basically, from taking their calls and documenting and then getting the issue off to the right department and the right people. And that would be partly through new software that engineering is working on right now in implementing. And what the plan would be is that the fact that we are downsized by one employee, which was our switchboard operator, that instead of hiring a full-time person, that we hire 2 part-time staff that we can use along with our existing staff on the first floor to have a sort of a conglomerate group of individuals that can answer the phone. So if one person's answered one call and the phone is ringing, then the second person can answer the call and the third person can answer the call. So there's a whole system that we've been working on, and Amber's been working hard on to determine how that would come about, so that we ensure that we're answering everybody's phone calls. And 2 part-time staff. This is it's if it was for a full year, it would be $34,000 each, and that is wages and not so much benefits, but statutory benefits because they're part-time. And they would work 24 hours a day, and in this year starting roughly in July, so we're looking at half this year, half next year. And the part-time staff would be there to supplement the full-time staff for breaks, lunches, and so on. And if Amber's got any more to add to that.
Just it's 24 hours a week, not a day?
What did I say?
A day?
Oh, 24 hours a week.
24 hours a week. Okay.
Yeah, we're not 24/7.
Okay. Anything else, Amber?
So yeah, just to speak to that a little further, we had a switchboard operator, and as nice as she was, the ability for customer service was limited because it was always just transferring on to other people. So it was identified to remove that position, but we haven't heard great response from the automated system either. So our approach, we would like to improve the citizen experience. So the idea is that when someone comes to the front counter or when they call in, they aren't just getting transferred. Because of what we heard the most is that they don't like dealing with the automated system, but they also don't like finally getting to someone and getting a voicemail. So, and sometimes people don't need to talk to a staff member. They don't need to call back. They just need to call someone quickly and report an animal on the side of the road, or how do I get boat tickets for Canal Days. And if we can have a customer service person that can log their request, give them some questions, and at some point they will have to transfer them. But if we can limit that by having the instant customer service experience, we would think it's a better overall approach.
I've got Councillor Beauregard and Councillor Baggett.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Peter. You said for the summer student, the purpose of the summer student was to relieve customer service full-time individuals. Would this customer service part-time staffing do the exact same thing?
Can I have Amber answer that?
Yeah, go ahead.
So before looking at customer service, just looking at the current situation of the first floor, the summer student is needed to alleviate the current staffing. That request may not come back next year, depending on once the implementation happens, which I don't believe it will happen before the beginning of the summer. So once 2 part-time staff are in, we may not need it next year. I can't commit either way, but currently as it stands, we do need the summer student to alleviate the coverage in the summer.
Okay, Councillor? Okay, Councillor Baggett?
Actually, I have no problem with this at all, but it's a lot more than just the money. It's actually a policy change for the city. And we have to make sure through city council, through the CAO, that our staff follows the new policy change of getting back to our taxpayer promptly. And so it's a lot more than just the money.
Correct.
It's like an attitude change. Well, I shouldn't say that because most of our staff is great. But so, like, I don't like getting an answering machine. When I finally get to the right person, I think it's the right person. But, and then wait a day and a half, 2 days later, and I get a reply. So, that's all.
Yeah, and with our clerk's department and Amber, I mean, it does go beyond what you're seeing here. Like a big issue with this city is if I call in and I have a complaint and then I talk to somebody, then 5 days later I call you, Councillor Begg, and I said, well, I've never heard back from anybody, I didn't talk to anybody. We really don't have good information to say who, when, why. So what the clerk wants to do, and this is all part of it, so that when you call in, they can track, no matter who's talking to you, said, well, no, you talked to Councillor Begg, you on this date, you talked to Chris Lee on this date, staff were out investigating on this date, because we all get it, well, nothing's ever happened. But yes, it has, or nobody's ever called me back. Well, we can log all that. So as this system goes forward, and what the clerk's gonna put in, and this is all part of it, it'll be a better tracking system for us, so that when issues do arise, it's not a he said, she said scenario. And it is better customer service. So, I mean, that's where it's all gonna lead, and this is just taking us down that road. And the clerk's got a whole scenario that we've gotta go through. There's some software programming and things like that that have to be brought on board as we move along.
I have no problem with that. I think it's a great idea. The one problem I couldn't see is somebody calling by law and want to sort of call anonymously because maybe it's their next door neighbor and they don't want their name associated with it. Because sometimes names get back to people.
No, that's true, and then we can have, I mean, bylaw deals with that now, so, I mean, there are those issues, because some issues are very right into the privacy issue, and we know through our bylaws people that's there. So this is mostly on, potholes and drainage and things like that, normally that name's out of the public anyways, but it's just a way for our staff to track it from first call to last call, so that, we know things are going smoothly as a council, and staff knows who the last person was that talked to that person and what they actually talked about. So, Amber?
Yeah, just further to that system. So the operations department has been working hard with a works program, a work order program. So we're hoping to piggyback on that and use that system, so it won't be any added funds for the computer program for the city for the customer service.
Okay. I had Councillor Beauregard, then Councillor Bruno.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and to Amber or yourself, you were saying that councillors, if we receive a phone call, we would document it. Does this system apply to staff as well as to councillors, or is it just staff?
Can be both.
I am unaware if it can be both or if we would take that approach at the moment, but I certainly, if you forwarded a response or a complaint, maybe say to me, I could log it in the system. Also, if you wanted to know information about, I guess a caller is like, If someone complained about something, was it dealt with by staff? We can say, staff responded in 3 days. They went out there, they fixed the issue, or no, no one's been able to do something, but these are the issues why, and this is how we're working with that resident right now.
Yeah, we won't, the 9 of us won't be logging in. But when you send an email to Amber, they will say that Mrs. Smith called Councillor Beauregard on January the 25th at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and discussed this issue. That's still a good start of it, and then it's passed along through, whether it's Amber, or it could be Sherry, it could be Chris Lee, whoever the department that you send it to, but then it's there, so that if they call back, there's a record of exactly who spoke to them, when, what was discussed, what were the ramifications of it, and what's happened since. Because once you pass that along, there could be 5 or 6 phone calls, or it could be done in 1 phone call. But it just doesn't drop off the face of the earth, kind of like it may today, and it creates that he said, she said scenario.
Well, yeah, working in the legal services, we are mandated by the Law Society to document everything, essentially, and I think it is definitely a good idea. And it definitely adds to transparency and helps all of us.
Definitely, it's something my office has done for many years, and what they say, document, document, document. So if you ever have to go to court of law and you can present what the whole thing that's transpired, the judge looks at it and says, yeah, well, they've gone through what they're supposed to. Yes. So, and as in your position, you know that. So the issue I had coming on board was that you did have the public calling us and said, well, nobody's ever called me back. You talked to staff. Well, that's not true. We've actually sent a crew out there, and we're waiting for a part to fix something. Not saying things don't happen, because we know they do, but both scenarios. So to protect everybody, specifically our staff, and make sure things are done right so that everybody's accountable to us around this horseshoe, this is a great system that staff wants to bring forward. Okay, Councilor Bruno?
Thank you. Through you to Amber. Amber, are you going to be presenting whatever system you get, or what the responsibilities will be? Because one of the things is you may have, we've heard from other departments, where they need some part-time help, whether in admin and things like that. So, between customer service resolution, customer service answering, will that staff be flexible to other departments, to your department? Will there be other duties associated with the job? Clerk?
Sorry, associated with these part-time jobs?
Yes.
So there'll be a counter and a phone positions, so they'll be rotating schedules, so those would be their primary role, but I think they will be available as needed on projects, but I think the biggest component they will own this system, this customer service, so something within the system will be knowledge based, which is the idea that when you call in and you want to know something, they can kind of do a Google search on it, and they'll be updating that, working with each department on making sure those things are accurate, and we can expand that role, whether it be some kind of customer service within our website. I'm sure that we will expand it as we go, but to get started for right now, it will be simply this system and answering the phones in the counter.
So that'll all come back to us still in a report?
I can definitely do a presentation.
Presentation, that's fine.
Full orientation, Councilor, is what you want?
Yeah. Second to that, will you be dealing at all with the technology of the phone system? I know at one time, if you dialed the backdoor number 01 and you got to someone and they weren't there, or you wanted to go back and try another extension, you used to be able to do that. Now, literally, it's gone backwards. Like, I've had to hang up, dial 2901 and try person 2 when you used to just be able to. So will there be a telephone technology component?
Yeah, so there is a portion in the budget, and Peter can speak to where that is, but it is a number that we don't know exactly what it will be yet, but the biggest component, I believe, will be phones. I'm working with our IT manager right now to evaluate what we have and what we will need for this. There will definitely be an improvement.
And finally, what you've highlighted there, 2 part-time at 24 hours starting July 1st, and then you've got 1/2/2020. So I guess what I'm getting at is this the remaining half of 2019 ask?
So I don't anticipate implementing this before midsummer
Right.
at the very earliest.
Yep.
So the cost won't be incurred at least until then.
Right, so I guess where I'm going with this is, we can expect then a 220 ask, because this is a half year?
This will be half this year, and then it will go regular going forward. But I think if you might want clarification, Peter can speak to that.
Peter?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, budgeting would be half this year, and then in 2020 would be the other half to ensure that we have the full coverage for the whole year of next year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Okay, we're all set with that one? No more questions? Okay, thank you.
Consensus to put that in the levy, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, that's what I'm getting, consensus.
Okay.
Nobody's asked to take it out.
That's 17 per year.
This is 34,000
Per year.
per year?
That 34,000 is for the half year,
So you're talking 64,000 for the year?
68,000 for the year,
Or
yes.
sorry, 68,000 per year.
Yes.
34,000 for 6 months,
That's two people.
times 2. Or
That includes
four-
2 people.
Includes 2 people. So this is just for this budget year. So you're paying 2 part-time staff, 34,000 combined for this year only.
That's through you, Mr. Mayor, that's their wage plus the
Statutory,
statutory
yes.
benefits.
Yeah. The cost. Anything else, Counselor? No. Okay. Everybody set with that one? Okay, thank you. Stone repairs on roads and shoulders, $5,000.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What I can do is have Mr. Lee speak to this particular item.
Thanks. Chris?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the rest of council. This particular 5,000 expenditure is for materials only, and that's for the operations crews to do some upgrades on some of the fire lanes that we've inherited recently and bring those up to some city standards.
So you're saying that the 5,000 will carry on each year?
Yes.
Correct? Okay.
Correct.
Questions on that one? Councillor Wells.
To you, Worship, to Mr. Lee. I noticed that you've reduced the roads and construction maintenance budget by about $130,000 this year. Yet you're only asking for $5,000 for stone. And $5,000 to me on stone, in my experience, doesn't go very far. So my question to you is that going to be enough?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Wells. That is just for the stone actual itself, I mean, just like shouldering or whatever. The other reduction we refer to has other elements that we can discuss in the next line on the budget if you wish. But that's just an upgrade on what we currently have in our stone allocation budget for materials. So that increase is simply to do, we're trying to do one fire lane at a time, and we will work our way through. We inherited five or six of them that came to our attention in the last 2 or 3 years. And so this is an attempt to bring those up to a city standard so that we can maintain those properly.
Okay, Councillor? Okay. All right, we'll leave that one in. Okay. So that's that page. Turn your page. Nowadays, volunteer incentive program, 3,500. Peter? I know we touched on this earlier, but
Have Ashley or Nicole speak to the next 3 items, actually.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to council. Actually, the Canal Days Advisory Committee just met this evening and heard a very brief overview of this idea that staff is bringing forward. Staff is recommending allocating $3,500 in the Canal Days budget in order to provide a sort of an incentive, sort of a donation of sorts to minor sports teams in order to get parents and the players to volunteer for providing support during Canal Days. Specifically, we were taking a look at additional support for the bar sales, as well as donations. That was also considered. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that council may have.
okay, questions to the first 3,500? Nothing? Okay. See none. We'll go through all 3 first, I guess. The Canal Days volunteer, the Canal Days high level entertainment, 50,000.
Again, the Canal Days Advisory Committee heard a little bit about this this evening, and the addition of $50,000 is for talent procurement. I've heard anecdotally from members of council that they wanted to consider this as part of a budget request. The intention is that perhaps we might be able to procure a high-level act like Blue Rodeo once again for Canal Days.
Questions? Councillor Bruno.
Thank you. Through you to the director. Should that not be commensurate with the raising of funds, whether that be via increased beer prices, toonie sponsorship, $5, you know, at the door, any and all of the above to be considered? I mean, it's one thing to elevate the level of entertainment, but at either free or, I'm not sure what the cost of a beer is there now, but if you're going to have that, it should be commensurate with some revenue enhancements.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to Councillor Bruno. Yes, I understand your point, and actually the committee this evening was reviewing a number of those initiatives, ways in which to increase revenues and decrease expenses. So at this point in time, I would probably defer to the committee on what their final decision will be on those matters, but staff will definitely report back through the committee on those items.
Peter?
If I can just add to that too, is that Councillor Bruno had mentioned sponsorship. Over the last number of years, we've always budgeted for about $120,000 in sponsorship money, and we've only been able to arrive at $100,000. So in essence, in this budget, I've actually reduced the $120,000 to $100,000 to be more realistic, and that's even last year where we thought that we would be able to increase the sponsorship because we had a higher level entertainment, 20,000 or with Blue Rodeo, and it didn't come to fruition. So the fact that if we're able to get more sponsorship is still to be seen. I know we have a new person on board right now that has some experience in it, so hopefully maybe that bar can be raised, but at this point in time I'm suggesting that we keep it at the same dollar amount, or the $100,000. As far as bar sales go, we did see an increase in bar sales, huge increase in, last year with Blue Rodeo. So with the higher level entertainment, obviously it brought out more people, more sales. It added to our revenues, which helped offset some of the cost of the higher entertainment. The bar sales were increased in this year's budget, but not to the same extent, to be a little bit conservative. So until we sort of see how things sort of pan out, then it's a matter of adjusting them as we go along. But to adjust the revenues too high and then find out that we don't, and that's been our problem in the past, is that we meet our expenditures, but again, you never know what the revenues are going to bring in, because we don't get the revenues until, most of the revenues until the weekend of the event. And as long as the weather is good in that, then the revenues come in, and God forbid that doesn't happen. So I think we have to be very conservative on our revenues, which means if we're going to continue with the event, I think council has to look at putting more dollars into the event as what the city is contributing for the signature event of the municipality.
Just to touch on that, Councillor, coming out of today's meeting, I'm just pulling up my calendar here. We adjourned our meeting because we weren't finished because of this meeting, but several items came up through the committee that Councillor Claylough, Councillor Borgard, and myself sit on, and staff. So we will be bringing a lot of that forward, and we are looking at meeting the week of the 4th, right? Week of the 4th, girls. So the week of the 4th we'll come back. So we'll bring that back, but we do have some initiatives. There are, as Peter talked about, sponsorships. There have been some requests or inquiries, I should say, through my office with regards to some pretty solid sponsorship people out there to come forward to be part of our festival. So we want to go down that avenue also. So and then Mr. Applejay, who looks after our concert venue and entertainment, brought forward several ideas also. So we're formulating that. That was the first meeting of this committee. So as soon as that comes forward, we'll certainly keep everyone in tune with that with regards to how we can offset our cost as a city towards this festival. Last year was a growing pain with the moving of the concerts from the Market Square, yet you've gone from approximately 5,000 a night to 10,000 a night at the park. So some logistics that staff is putting together, which are fantastic ideas of how to collect more dollars at the gate, how the gates are going to work, how things are going to work inside. They went through a site overview after last year's event very quickly, so they're going to bring those forward, and then anything else that we have as the council members that we'll bring forward. So there's going to be a whole myriad of things we want to bring in, but like we said, and I sat here a couple weeks ago, the buck stops here, so that's what we're going to be working on. So, you know, anytime you guys want to give us a hand, I don't have a problem with that, but we really want to move fast on this because August 1st comes very quickly. Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I would just, this is something that we hear about from the public probably more than almost any other subject. We hear about Canal Days. We hear about from the people who really think we spend too much. We hear from the people who don't think we spend enough and we need better entertainment. We have both sides going on all the time, no question. And I love Canal Days, and I've served on that committee for the last 16 years, 15 years, and was a volunteer 5 years before that. So believe me, I'm into Canal Days. But I understood raising the bar last year. It was the 40th anniversary. There was a reason to put extra money to it. I got that. This year, we're not in a good position to be granting all kinds of extra money all over the place. We really need to start maybe taking a look at what we do and doing it better in ways that cost a little bit less. So hearing whatever the committee comes up with as to how they can offset some of the costs, I'd love to hear that. That would be a good thing. I'm just really reluctant to say, yeah, sure, 50 grand, no, go ahead. I'm really reluctant to say that. Yep. I really would like to see, if you're going to do this, then maybe you better consider a gated event. You know, you better consider something else, because at this point, $50,000 with no guarantees, or not even close to guarantees, you're really rolling the dice here on this.
Correct.
That is a very scary thing. So I really do have strong concerns on this one. And at this point, I wouldn't go forward with it until I'd want to hear a lot more.
Okay, so before I throw something at that, Councillor Kraloff?
Through the mayor, could I just ask you, Peter, were there any profits realized last year? I was never told that.
To you, Mr. Mayor, last year, no. We had a deficit last year, and the year before, I believe we had a small deficit also. And so, and I guess that's why I've always said that I think we need to be putting some more dollars towards our event. We as a city, on the tax levy, basically we've been putting about $27,000 out of taxpayers' money towards the event, which really isn't a lot of money. We've really been depending on the revenue sources to come in and cover the majority of the costs, and for the most part they do. But again, if for whatever reason something happens that we don't, get the donations, again we're relying on the public that are coming to keep the concerts free to give us some half-decent donations, whether it's $5, $10.
And if we have bad weather, we're in trouble.
And if we have bad weather, we definitely are in trouble. So, I think with the limited amount of money that we've been putting into the event, and it's our signature event, other than staffing, obviously the staffing is a huge component, and there's a cost to that for staffing for the 4 days.
The 27,000 is on top of the staffing as well?
The 27,000 is what is gone in as a tax levy. The staffing, basically, the only additional staffing cost that would be involved is any overtime. Majority of staff will take the overtime in lieu and take time off some other point in time. A lot of the staff are already working, so it's already in the budget, and we don't get overtime. So it's just a matter of whoever is working overtime and requesting to be paid for that overtime then that's a direct cost to the event. And there is a portion of the cost that is that. But with regard to just the budget itself and and how much we are subsidizing it, this particular event, it is $27,000 on an $800 or $600,000 to $700,000 event is pretty small dollars that we're actually physically putting into the event. And so, you know, whether it's $50,000 or a portion this year, $25,000, and try to phase that in to try to, because the last thing you want to do is every year we're going to run into a deficit, which means we're covering that deficit through other parts of our operations in the city. And so, to be realistic, if we're going to put on the event, you want a realistic number in the as to how much money we're putting into the event as our signature event for the municipality.
The complaint I keep hearing from people, I guess I've spoken to a lot of the vendors or the business owners on West Street. They're always concerned about the vendors that are brought in. I know they bring in money, but at the same time, I keep hearing the complaint that it's taken away from the whole marine theme of Canal Days, what it used to be years ago versus now. You know, and I've often said to them, well, there's other opportunities for them to maybe be located somewhere else. We could figure it out differently. I didn't realize that we had those costs on top. I thought that we were breaking even kind of, and we were looking at trying to make money on this event rather than losing money.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, with regard to the vendors, there is a considerable amount of money that we do, revenue that we do receive from those vendors, and which helps pay for the event. And you know, unfortunately, reducing those would reduce the revenues, which would then increase our costs. So it's a, you know, which way do we go? And you know, people do buy from those vendors. It's interesting enough as to how much they buy from those vendors, but that is a big source of our revenue for covering our costs.
Councillor, that vendor issue is coming up. Was on our agenda today, which we'll do when we reconvene.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Demeray, if we could, do you want to park that in to defer the funding for now, till more information comes back?
I actually would. I'd like to hear more from the committee on their ideas, just so I get a sense of confidence and I can relay that to the people who call.
Exactly. Okay, is that all right, Council? Consensus? Okay, Peter, we'll defer that, put in the defer file column right at this time. Defer file, the defer column.
Yep, deferred to next meeting.
Yep. Okay, new fishing tournaments, 25,000, staff? Call?
Thank you, Mayor Steele, to all of council. I think you've become accustomed to seeing a dollar amount allocated to fishing tournaments here in the community. For the last 2 years, we've been host to the B1 bass fishing tournament. The B1 will not be returning to Port Colborne next year. However, we have been negotiating with other tournament organizers, and we have the potential of hosting 3 tournaments within the community, one being hosted by King of the Lake, potentially being hosted around Canal Days as an option, as a venue, as an addition to that event in itself. The second is the Budweiser Can-Am, which is a locally hosted event here that volunteers put on. And the third being a new tournament, being the Canadian Sport Fishing League's perch tournament in early May to highlight the perch fishing within the community. So 3 different events during 3 different times in the summertime to draw and enhance the fishing draw to our community.
Questions? Councillor Demeray.
Thank you. Through you to Nicole, can you tell me, first of all, let me say I'm really encouraged to see this because I do think that we need to put more emphasis on fishing tournaments. I think it's a good thing. But can you tell me why V1 is not returning?
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Demeray, the B1 has signed in in Windsor, and will be focusing their efforts on that portion of the province.
So they haven't given you a reason why they've decided to leave Port Colborne?
I would suggest the financial contribution from the neighboring community was considerably higher than the city of Port Colborne's.
Did they approach us to ask for more?
No, they did not.
Okay. And can you tell me what happened to the 444?
Not knowing the full history, I believe volunteerism and essentially things have become tired.
Fair enough. Okay, thank you. That's all I just wanted to know.
Okay, Councillor Wells and Councillor Danch.
Through you, the worship, to Nicole. Do we have any, I know it's very difficult to assess or to put a number to it, to the revenue that would be generated in our commercial base through these events. Is there a sort of a swag number that you could say, or a percentage that you could put to that? Because a way of offsetting the cost that we put in is if we bring a benefit to our retail community, then we can rationalize some of that levy.
Offhand, I certainly can't provide a number to you, but I can work with Jordan, our economic development officer. There's a formula, it's called TRIM, when calculating sporting events coming to various communities, which will be able to give us an idea of, say we had 25 participants or 25 teams from out of the community with four people on each of those teams. We could then populate that into a typical number that Sports Tourism Ontario recognizes that would give you a number that would be invested into the community. So I can get that information back to you, certainly.
Yep.
Just to follow up on that, Nicole, with that, is there, and I'm not sure if there's a committee working with this or an advisory group on this, but is there a way maybe we could take a look at what we could do to enhance that?
Certainly.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Danch?
I guess through you to Nicole. The B1, will we pay them $10,000 each year when they were coming? I don't even remember what it was.
$20,000 annually.
So if we're paying $25,000 for potentially 3 tournaments, we're getting a little more for our buck there, are we not?
I would suggest yes.
That's my question.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bruno?
Yes, Nicole, you referenced that those of us who have been around the community for a number of years are accustomed to having fishing tournaments here, and you've talked about 444 and the other one no longer. Councillor Dench just raised the point of what we were spending. So this is levy funding. So my question is, what were we spending? If we were spending 10 last year, what was it from? Is that now really 10 plus 25? I'm trying to get a sense of what we were spending versus this ask.
So previously we were spending $20,000 for the 2 years to host the tournament with B1, as well as additional support from requests from the Budweiser Can-Am previously. So we tended to waive boat fees, dock fees, things like that. So we would not be spending it. We would be spending $5,000 more to incorporate all 3 tournaments.
Peter?
And just to answer part of your question as to where those funds are coming from, the 2 years that Berkeley came forward, those funds were funded out of the OMPF funds. So they're one-time funds, not on the levy. So that's why if the tournaments are going to continue and we're going to continue in that field, then the $25,000 would be on the levy because it would be an annual thing.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Councillor Beauregard and Councillor Clalliff.
Through the mayor to Michelle. Do we have any idea how many residents of Port Colborne take part in these fishing tournaments?
I would have to refer to Mark Miner, who has been probably most involved in terms of the Budweiser Can-Am, being the Canadian Sports Fishing League. They host 40 tournaments throughout all of Ontario through the course of the year. They can have followings up to 100 teams participating. King of the Lake also hosts a number of tournaments within Lake Ontario and Lake Erie, primarily with salmon fishing and lake trout. And I believe they host 7 to 10 tournaments with anywhere from, I believe, 25 to 40 to 50 boats within the tournament.
Okay, Mark?
Okay, another numbers question. Right? I do have the numbers from the previous question, which was 876 transients last year and 1,253 nights. So just to get that out there. So for the 444, there's roughly 100 teams in it, and I would say probably 30 to 40 of those were our local at our marina. So we did have a good over 50% coming in from from other places. So Americans, Port Dover, different parts of the region, Toronto, and beyond. So it does pull in a lot of people. One of the best things, just to add on everything with the fishing tournaments, one of the best things that happened with the 4 and the Budweiser was allowing the camping in the park. So now you have people staying here, they're using our facilities, they're eating breakfast, their lunch, dinner is here, whereas other places, maybe they're going back to hotels, which Port Colborne doesn't have hotels, they have some motels and stuff like that, so they might have been staying out. So having the camping is really a plus for a lot of the fishermen.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm curious because fishing is not really necessarily a sport that too many people do, and we're asking for like 20 Port Colborne. No, there's not too many comparing to Canal Days. For Canal Days, it's something that a lot of residents of Port Colborne will be involved in, and we're asking for about 50,000 or so, and then the fishing derby, which would have substantially less people that I would say is from Port Colborne taking part, and we're going to ask for almost half of the amount. I see quite a little bit of a difference there, and that's why I asked that question.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Clayla.
Mark through Mr. Mayor, could I just ask you, is there any recouping? I know the fees for these tournaments are very exorbitant. My sons are fishermen. And do you recoup any of that money from the 444, with those fees that they pay? Do they pay anything to the city at all from them?
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Clayliff, the 444, we did, part of their registration fee included dockage. So we didn't get anything in that sense, but they did give us a $10,000 check to go towards our extension of the fishing dock, which will be part of the budget later on. But yes, we do get quite a bit of revenue. We sell all the ice to them. We sell fuel. We make lots of money in fuel. They're going out and using their gas and coming in and filling up with us. So we're constantly getting tankers in there to fill us up. They're buying, the pops and chips and things like that, souvenirs. They're going over to our marine supply store and buying little things when stuff breaks down. So yeah, we definitely do recoup a lot. The Budweiser, we did charge dockage. We do give a discount based on how many boats come in. So we did get some dockage revenue from that as well.
Great, I thought so. Thanks very much, Mark.
Thank you, Councillor.
Just as additional information for council, with these new events, we have taken into consideration that there have been a lot of long-standing volunteers in the community that have hosted these events. So we haven't been in consultation with them, and they are supportive of the events that we are suggesting and have worked and have agreed to work in a partnership with them. So.
Okay. Okay. Any more questions to that? So are we leaving it on the levy funding side? Consensus is yes?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Thanks, Nicole. Okay, Peter? Next is Niagara Development Corridor Partnership, $2,500.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to ask for the city's economic development officer to come forward and speak to this.
Thanks, Julie.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the Economic Development Corridor is a partnership between a few municipalities, Port Colborne, Welland is no longer in there, they've opted out, Fort Erie, St. Catherine, Niagara Falls, and Lincoln. The region has recently joined the group. So we've actually been paying $5,000 as part of that membership since it has been in existence. They've actually asked recently that we consider increasing the rates, increasing the dues to the group. What they've actually been doing is anything that the regional economic development department is not doing. So the conversation that we're having in terms of FDIs, and they're doing a research now on emerging markets and which emerging markets should be focused on. And the intention is that the municipalities that are part of this corridor will work together on joint marketing and also in terms of targeting certain embassies throughout Ontario that they figure is good to build a relationship with based on the sector's that exists within the groups. So the ask is just that we consider increasing that so we can actually do more work together as the municipalities.
Okay, questions? Consensus is leave it? Okay, thank you. Next is the BESS office at Roselawn, $15,500.
Okay.
Julie?
So when we had the strategic planning session, one of the things that we had put forward was that we wanted to do more work in terms of entrepreneurship, and this is also building on the strat plan that was approved by council in April. So entrepreneurship is something that I've actually been putting forward in my work plan and pushing within the community, both youth and adult entrepreneurship. We had a meeting with Niagara Falls Enterprise Small Business Center because we don't have the physical resources in terms of manpower in Port Colborne. We don't have a business center, and so our residents are actually missing out on a number of federal programs that exist out there. Start a Company Plus, Summer Company. There are a number of programs that has grants, training, and mentorship opportunities tied to them. So the idea was that if we're able to actually partner with that center, we'll be able to actually provide the services on a regular basis to Port Colborne. So I wanted to be able to bring the services here. So we've actually been doing that, and we're actually working with other agencies to bring their services here on a regular basis. So with the Best Center, we are responsible for the hours of those business development officers and the travel time. So they're only here right now 2 days because we're doing a trial basis for 6 months. So they're only here 2 days for the month, the 2nd and the 4th Wednesdays. And we've been having a lot of traction in terms of the number of residents who are coming forward with business ideas and sitting with the consultants to work on their business plans. We are also working together on some workshops because I'm proposing that we host a number of seminars and workshops throughout the year. Some that have been done directly through the municipality, but others in partnership with them. So we'll be having those. We are also doing presentations to the various high schools. So we have a number of these scheduled. And so this is not something that has been in our budget. It's a new program that we launched. And so we'd actually need resources in order to carry this on.
Questions? Councillor Demery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Julian. First of all, Julian, congratulations on getting all this up and running, because I'm hearing some good things out in the community, and that's always good to hear. And secondly, I would absolutely support this. What I would like to hear is some updates on occasion. If you could come in and report to council on how things are going.
So I've requested a formal report in terms of the status of each of those, because normally they call me, I speak to them, sometimes we have a sit down together, and then I refer them to the business development office to work on their business plans. Yeah. So I've actually asked them in a discussion that we had today to provide with a report with each of those clients that they've been meeting with, what the status of those discussions are, and whether or not the companies, they're moving forward with their companies, whether or not they're also looking at grant and the sectors they're actually focusing on. So we can actually present this to the committee as well.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Councillor, any other questions? Seeing none, we're leaving it in. Consensus, leave it in for now? Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Next is $3,101 for the receptionist increased hours to 180 hours for the museum.
Only $1.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Yes, this request is essentially for one more day. So currently we do have a paid reception for 4 days, and I'm asking for 5. All of the staff do reception, and we also have volunteers on reception. We're not really wanting to change that. However, we're doing a lot more outreach. So we're doing tours off-site in the downtown. We're planning some Tennessee Avenue tours this year. We're doing outreach at Northland Point. So sometimes we're not there to be on desk, and this would just facilitate the customer service that we need to keep up with in terms of reception.
Okay.
Any questions?
No, Councillor Bruno, we're not funding this through pudding sales. Okay? Yeah, the great pudding keeper. Any questions? Councillor Kleoff.
It's not a question, it's just a thank you. You're doing a wonderful job. I talk to people and they're always telling me about the wonderful history in Port Colborne, compliments constantly on the museum and the library, and the addition of the tours this year of Tennessee Avenue. I think it's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Great.
Okay, no questions to that, we're leaving that in? Consensus is yes? That's what I'm getting. $1,636 for administrative assistant, 95 hours.
So, this is actually an important position, and it's something that we've really avoided over the past, and it's to support our volunteer-run tea room, really. So it's an administrative role to help our volunteer, who actually celebrated 40 years, longest-running volunteer-run tea room in Canada. We're very proud of them. But we need to find new opportunities and maybe get some of our databases up to date for them. So this role of this person would just be to assist them. It's not going to be working at the tea room. It's really behind the scenes doing schedules, maybe going into the high schools and talking to them about their volunteer hours. Would they like to come in, work with the already existing volunteers, do a few shifts there? But it needs legwork to get out there into the community and do these kinds of things. So we've designed it so that it would be pretty much a day, an afternoon, a week during the season, and then we've added a few hours for the Grand Ole Christmas Festival. That's actually to assist with that festival as well. One of the days I remember just this summer, we had 58 customers in 2 hours with 3 volunteers. So, you know, they can call over and call us and we can go and help, but we need a little bit more organizations in terms of a call out list and other people that we can call and say, hey, today's your day, yeah, come in, that kind of thing. So that's really what we're envisioning for this position.
Okay, questions? Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. I wanted to ask, are you experiencing the same kind of decline in volunteerism? Because the museum was always one, to me, that had the greatest number of volunteers, the most passion, the most dedication. I'm just wondering through the years, and with these asks, are you experiencing, like cultural clubs and halls and things like that, are you experiencing any decrease?
Through Mayor Steele to Councillor Bruno, not at all. So we are trying to, actually because we're growing, we're doing more programming, more things are becoming available, that we need staff to keep up with our volunteers. So you're actually seeing the opposite. I just did the Ontario Volunteer Service Award nominations. I've got one on there for 40 years, continuously, since 1979. So we find that we can really accommodate even, one of the interesting ones is someone who, she finishes work at 3:30, so she comes and volunteers from 4 till 5, 1 hour and a half. We have a job for her, she comes in every week. It's a great, we can really accommodate flexibility because there's such a variety of jobs we have. So if anyone is interested in volunteering, please do come and see me.
Okay, no advertising. Okay. So consensus is to leave this in? Seeing that? Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie. Next up is the library for additional 100 part-time hours at $2,172.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to Council. The responsibility and the mandate of the library is to provide quality services and resources to our community users, and that is on behalf of the municipality, which set us up here. A year ago on New Year's Eve, 2017, we formally launched our pop-up library. And this was to reach out to underserviced users and to different areas of the city which we don't have a branch, but we have a pop-up. And that goes in the trunk of our car, and we go throughout the city. We've been to Shirkston Shores, who didn't know we had a real library here. And to our delight and to theirs, they've come to the library, signed up, got library cards, and they're benefiting from library services. Our librarian has also reached out to nursing homes, schools who cannot afford to bus their children to the library and who have to walk. That's great, they walk, but those who cannot, we've reached out to them. We've also reached out to Market Square, trying to make ourselves of more benefit to our community. To do that, to facilitate that, 100 extra hours has been of a benefit this past year because it relieves our librarian from her desk duties, and also some of them come with us. And so that 100 extra hours has greatly expanded services, and we're asking for another 100 hours this year.
Okay, questions? No? Consensus is to leave it in?
I just want to say to what I said to the museum.
Thank you, Councillor. Consensus is to leave it in at this time? Thank you, councillors.
Thank you.
Thank you. Building Bylaw Division, Administrative Intake Clerk, $27,084. They're coming to us in stereo now.
It's building a bylaw.
That's right. That's what I said, in stereo.
Thank you for giving us an opportunity to talk about this. The Building and Bylaw Administrative Intake Clerk is similar to not being able to implement this till, we're talking about halfway through the year, so we're asking half up front now and half following year and then implementing it full-time from there. The number of complaints that come into the office with regards to building and bylaw, we influx at the same time, so it gets super busy for both people at the same time. We have one person to take all that information in, as well as be the front counter person answering all the questions and people coming to the front counter. What we're looking at for this administrative intake clerk is being the front counter person for the entire floor, including community services, because they don't have a front counter person for that half of the building as well. So anybody that comes to our floor, this person would find out who they needed to speak with, get the right person, pass them on with that information, as well as take all the bylaw complaints, enter those all in, and provide all the paperwork that the officers are doing to close out a file. They would then take all that paperwork and close out the files for the officers. The officers have more time to go out and do the other complaints, since we have implemented the repeat offender and shortened time frame, that they'll have more time to go out and do the actual inspection. So this is what we're looking for on the intake clerk, and if Todd has anything else to add to that.
No, it would, as she was saying, it would reduce the burden for the clerk that we have. It also indirectly reduces some of the burden off me, because it's inevitable I myself will end up doing basically administrative work because she's so busy with everything that's happening already. So I'll just take on, entering some notes, photocopying reports that I need, that sort of thing, so that she can remain focused on whatever she's doing at the moment, which could just be a heavy counter day. So I myself will pitch in. Sherry does the same thing. She'll pitch in and fill in for the administrative side of things if it just needs to be done right away.
Okay, Council? Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Todd. I know you're having a public session on building permit fees, and I know that annually you can review your fees, and some of those fees can go up commensurate with the cost and cost recovery. Would, or do you see any of that review potentially helping to pay for this position, or is it, and I guess if I can ask this at the same breath to Sherry, you talked about sharing some customer service time with Nicole and Ashley's department. So I'm trying to get a handle on it, this would be your joint portion of that cost, nothing to do with the other department.
Right. We would be splitting this in the next position that we'll talk to you about as well. We basically would split this 50-50. I'm not sure that economic development or them would be taking on any of the financial burden.
They're not taking on the financial burden, but they don't have a lot of admin stuff because they have an executive admin to do their work. It's more the front counter portion for them because they have no front counter person.
It's just having a face at the counter. It's not worth hiring a whole person or a part-time person to cover that. If we're going to have two, we can answer the counter for those, because we'll know who they need to get to the counter. It's a pretty simple task, but there's a value to it. So not worthy of an entire position.
And so just in regards to the potential for increasing your...
Sorry, to answer your first question. So we increased the fees last year, which was a little bit of anticipation on ramping up some labor in the future. At that time, it was mostly reading the tea leaves. There was going to be more need for, my only solution at the time was get in some part-time people. For example, some of you would remember Lyle Merritt, the previous CBO. He'll cover for me if I'm taking holidays. That's a part of it. I needed more than that, though. I need people there at the same time I'm there, just to deal with the burden of inspections and plans review, et cetera. So I had to ramp that up a little bit, understanding that we were going to hire a part-time person, which we did near the end of 2017. Put money in the budget for that. Went over the budget on that because, you know, construction continued to grow and the volume of work continued to grow to the point where there's a couple of things. I guess I'll skip ahead a little bit into the next one because it'll answer. You'll ask me that question again if I don't answer it now. So it's gotten to the point where having a part-time person available isn't really an option because there's really not that part-time person necessarily available out there. We had Dave Mathot, who is helping us, but he has his own business as well, his own contracting and design business. So he's trying to get that business going. While he started that, this is a nice way to augment things for him. He used to be a building inspector elsewhere. He appreciates the need and the help that I need to get that work done. But it's even more than he can do. So we've lost Dave, even not lost him. He's not as available to me as he was. So who do I replace that with? Lyle is already engaged in Pelham, and even he is probably going to be, you know, retiring again from being retired. Probably that won't last forever. So even he won't be available to cover for me on holidays. So the next step ahead really is to bring in somebody who can bridge that gap for the time that we need and get us actually back up to providing the customer service levels that we're just not even meeting, let alone, you know, extend further our customer service out there. So that answers that question. So there is a little bit of money in there. On my department, even with the current building department revenues, I can tell you, looking forward to when we would need full funding for these positions, is not going to cover that. We've been in the black for the last few years, basically on the back of having one person do all of this work. You add in, albeit a less expensive second person in there, even sharing it with bylaw, we're probably not going to generate the revenue unless we get a huge increase in building revenue again. It's probably not going to cover it, so it'll probably bring an end to the days of being in the black for revenue versus expenses on the building. But I have increased the fees the last couple of years when they had not been increased at all over 5 years. So I would anticipate we'll see incremental increases annually would be my suggestion going forward.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Dan.
Sorry for the bathroom break, and thank you guys for stepping up. One thing that I noticed in this position, and then we're going to talk about the next position, this one here is a hybrid position. It's not only helping Todd in building, it's also bylaw enforcement. I look at providing service to the customer, and the time for building permit issuance and inspections, right now that is one person. And as Todd mentioned, we're thankful to have some help to do that. But this position would then more or less guarantee that the permits are getting issued on time because they're subject to what the building code says for issuance. And this individual will help with reviewing permits and also helping at the counter when Todd's not available, he's out on inspections, and then there's really no one else to step up and help the customer. So I see this position by doing that.
Okay. Councillor Clayliff.
Todd and Sherry, through the mayor, I can attest to the fact of what Dan has said as well. We're just been in the process of doing these, and I know how busy they both are, both Sherry and Todd, and getting there. And I like the fact that they're talking about sharing a partnership with one person, and it's basically they're only asking for a part-time each, and then the second inspections officer, when you look at the building that is going on, and I know that Todd's busy all the time, and I think that it is a service. I hear people have said to me how long it's taking to get building permits, and they know that there's a lot going on. So, you know, it attests to the fact that we are growing, and I think that if we're growing, that we need to supply the services to people that they're paying for. So, I'm in favor of this one.
Okay, any other questions? Sure.
I just wanted to add that with the new cannabis legislation, we're not sure what we're going to be impacted by. There could be issues where we're getting complaints on mold. There could be complaints with regards to people starting to build sheds in their backyards. We're going to get zoning complaints with lot coverage, setbacks, as well as we're going to get complaints with electrical and plumbing issues when people are going to be changing things to be able to grow their plants at a higher or faster rate. So this person that we're asking for will be able to do building and property standards, so that no matter if it's an older issue or a newer issue, they can be combined and deal with that as well.
Okay. Any further questions? Yes, Councillor Danch.
Just since you brought up the cannabis issue, so could we use some of that funding to offset that cost, because it's all going with cannabis, right?
No, because you're talking about apples and oranges. Sherry's talking about the growing of cannabis, not the retail operation of cannabis.
But she mentioned that word cannabis.
I know, but she's talking the federal cannabis issue, not the provincial cannabis issue. Correct? It's the growing of it, so yes. I would say no to that, right, Peter? Thank you.
But thank you for trying.
But you know what? We can always be very creative in this city, and you never know. So I'm going to go with these two because we've heard about both positions, the 27084 and the 38998. Consensus is to leave them at this time? Okay. Our last item, thanks guys. Our last item is under physician recruitment, future recruitment, an ask of $16,175. Committee recommends additional $16,175 for new physicians. Ashley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to Council. This is a request that was initiated and recommended by the Physician Recruitment Committee. They're looking for additional funds in order to support their physician recruitment efforts.
Okay. Any questions to that? Councillor Demery?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Ashley. Ashley, could you maybe explain exactly what is involved in recruiting a physician and why such, such an increase in the funding?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to Councillor Demery. It's rather a complex process. I can tell you it's multifaceted. That includes communications with medical schools, attendance romp week attendance, as well as bringing forward medical students to participate in that as well. But it also includes financial incentive in terms of capital investment, offering to physicians that are looking to relocate or locate to the city of Port Colborne. With that, there is a certain aspect of it that there are a number of communities that have committees like this. There are a number of communities that have initiatives similar to the city of Port Colborne's. There's one in Niagara that we're aware of that has significant dollar backing for their committee. I don't want to speak about specifics, but in essence, the city of Port Colborne is competing with other communities in order to recruit physicians to the city. Does that adequately respond to your question?
That does help a lot. So of all the dollars that are asked for, not all of them go directly to the physician. Some of them are taking care of Rural Medicine Week and that sort of thing, correct? So that is good. And just moving forward, it might help to know what we feel the need for physicians here in the community are. I mean, we did hear a year and a half or 2 years ago, I guess it was, about a physician coming in where we did actually allocate quite a bit more money than we normally would have to get that person to come in. And we were assured at that time that it would take care of the waiting list entirely. for the retiring doctors at that time. And I know that since that time, there's no doctor that's retired. I know some are anticipated yet. So maybe we could hear about what the need is, so that, because, you know, people just see the dollar figure, they don't necessarily understand why.
Ashley?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Demery and the rest of council, I would be pleased to report back to council with regard to physician recruitment efforts and the number of individuals in the city that are perhaps without a physician themselves. So we'll provide an update to council.
Thank you, Ashley. We did have a meeting the other day, and it was a very good meeting without going into specifics. There was some pretty good outside the box thinking, as I like to say, with regards to attracting physicians. So there's going to be some stuff coming out of that committee in the near future. Okay. Okay. Any more further questions on that? Consensus is to leave it in for now? Okay. So with that, it is now 10 after 8. We'll take a 10-minute recess for everyone, and we'll be back here at 20 after 8. Turn your mics off. sorry. We're going through the OMPF funds and the reserve funds. I will not go through line by line. If there's any that need to be drawn out, Peter will go over those with you. If not, we're going to move on. Peter has a little presentation, and we'll go from there. And that'll probably be it for the night, and then we'll schedule the next meeting. So, under the OMPF funds, which are on the left-hand column, and the reserve funds, which are in the third column, those are items that are paid for. It's not part of the levy. Does anybody have any questions to those? Yes, Councilor Bourdain.
Just clarification for anyone who may be watching. Just levy essentially means a tax, correct?
Correct.
Okay, just making sure.
Correct. Page 3. Well, it's 3 and 4. It's both pages. I'm not, as I said, I'm not going through these one at a time because there is no levy issue with those. We have the money for those. I don't see any questions. Peter, do you want to, we're fine with those? Do you want to lead us into your chart now, and then we'll probably be finished?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So with the items that council has gone through this evening with regard to the adding of to the tax levy. So as you know, we've reduced the levy in a couple ways. One, the operations center debt, which is good. There's been a few additions, the grants and so on, and everything that the council went through tonight and added it to the levy. Two items that are deferred is the community safety, as to whether or not that should be some one-time funds, or should it be on the levy, or and what amount that may be. The other item being deferred is the canal days, as to what level of funding council wants to either put into the levy or one-time funding, if there's funds available, to discuss that. With that said, and what council has approved already, is we started at about 4.2% with the decrease from the operations center debt, and added basically in total about $96,000. So we're at about, our tax levy increase is at about 5.32%. Is where we're at. Now, as far as how that affects an average property, residential property, it's about a 4.59%, so it's less than the 5.32 of the tax levy, as I explained before, which is about $72 to the average residential homeowner. So that's where we're at today. Doesn't mean that that's where you're going to end up at the end of the day, because you have the opportunity next meeting to think about what we've added to the levy, think about whether or not that should continue to go forward, or if there's changes that council may want, then you would bring that up in the next at the next meeting. I know there's a question, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, Councillor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Peter. Just when I'm looking at the television, it's kind of hard to see
hard
the amount.
to see.
Do you know how to? If you hit Control and scroll up, you can zoom. You should usually be able to zoom into those figures, so it might be easier for someone to.
How's that? A little bit better?
No, the size he means.
So if you hit Control and zoom up, it'll just keep zooming, usually.
What do you want to do? Control what?
Is it working?
Is that what you want?
Yeah, something like that. Is
that a little better?
Yeah.
Okay.
So now, Peter, that $71 may change based on education in the region?
So the $72 is the city's portion of an increase based on our increase in the tax levy going forward. That amount, we don't know what the region is, so the 2.94%, that, if you remember, the phased-in assessment from 185,000 to 191,000, that's what that 2.94 is. So basically, the increase in assessment adds on the regional levy $31 and then education. We don't know what their tax rates are yet, so we really can't go by those numbers at this point in time, and we're anticipating hopefully that the education levy or the education tax rate is reduced, which will hopefully compensate any increase of the region or the city to reduce the overall levy down below our city increase of 4.59%. So again, these are preliminary numbers, and we're missing some information, as you know, with the regional tax rate, with the education tax rate. Once we know what those numbers are, we're going to know what the overall effect is to an average residential property owner. So we're just in the process. We're in the of establishing really the bulk of what we want to spend in 2019 as a council. So that's what we're trying to establish. Again, on the other piece of the puzzle that's missing is the provincial funding. And if I go back to this sheet here, anything that's under this column of OMPF funds, that's the provincial funding. So if our provincial funding is cut, then we have to come back to this column, or staff will go look at that column and provide recommendations back to council as to how we can make the changes to accommodate any cuts that may come forward. So that's where we stand today. And if council doesn't have any other issues with any of the other items that are being funded in one way or another, either through reserves or from provincial funding, we'll have to wait until we see what happens with the provincial funding before we can move forward. That's where we are at now, and I would suggest that if there are no other questions on that of staff, and staff are here, so if there's anything there that council wants more information on, that's what they're here for. And then next meeting, we would start with the capital budget. And if there's issues or concerns or comments with regard to the operating, we can deal with that first also. If councillors have additional questions when we start again, we can deal with that and then go on to the capital budget and go through that. And again, depending on when the provincial funding announcement is made, at some point we'll be coming back to council to say, okay, this is how it's affecting us.
Okay, Councillor Demery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, to Peter, I would refer you to page 11 in the detailed budget. First line item, councillors' conferences. A few years back, the amount set aside for councillors to attend conferences was slashed significantly. It is now at a point where it is no longer anywhere close to realistic. It works out to about $1,000 per councillor to go to a conference. Well, that in most cases won't even pay your registration, let alone any accommodation or traveling or food. So we need to look at this again as far as what a new number should be. I have a few ideas, but I'm really open to having a discussion that maybe get council to engage in a discussion, see how many of us do attend conferences, the value that they bring to the city. And I think Mayor Steele and Councillor Bruno can probably tell you the story of the value they bring to the city, and maybe then decide what number should be put in here and how that should be spread out between the councillors.
Councillor Bruno?
Thank you, Worship. I was a bit shocked coming back to council since 2010 to see that budget had been cut in half. Further to that, so it was like 16,000 and change or 17,000 for 8 people to attend conferences. These things aren't junkets or just get-togethers. We just actually during the break talked about the issue of the safety initiative. So at a conference you can find someone, a like-sized municipality, who may have done what we were contemplating doing. And to that end, save a bunch of consultant money and perhaps get an idea for a like-sized community. About a year or two ago, a year and a half to 2 years ago, I presented a check here for the sale of Port Colborne Fiber for $7.5 million. And at the time I had heard about what had happened here with the conference budget, and I said, well, I can give you 7.5 million reasons why you should have a conference budget that's decent. Councillor Steele, I think Councillor Badaway, was he there at the time?
Yes.
Yeah. We attended a conference, and that one, I believe, was in, was it Calgary or Edmonton?
Banff.
Banff, sorry. Anyways, we picked up on the whole fiber idea, and at that time there was an initiative being struck by the then Hydros in Niagara. Got all kinds of information, and we found some communities and some contacts that actually did what we were being asked to do. It went a long way in giving the council of the day the assurance to do it. We had the good fortune of having hydro lease payments each month, and so we didn't even go to the levy. And we invested $365,000, and there was a top-up years later to get us more of the commission on the fiber network. And after about 11 years, all that money was returned in dividends, and we had a pure profit of $7.5 billion. So that's just one item. I recall on a couple other ones, there were green initiatives when green wasn't in vogue that we brought back to the city and used. So I would just say to you all that probably one of the biggest bangs for the buck in the 15 years I was on council was what we allow our staff to do, and that is to re-up our knowledge, but most importantly, look at what other communities are doing. Yes, you can get a lot of that in the AMO magazine. Yes, you can get a lot of that on the internet, but I think if you've been around to know that there's nothing like talking to somebody who's gone through it. I think for a counselor, it's kind of a check and balance on what information we receive. And I would recommend that not only that we up the budget, but that I don't think we need to divvy it to so much per counselor, because in given years you will have counselors who don't go, and that opens up money. I think you should put a limit on how many each counselors could go, but you know, you're now looking at, like everything else, 12 or 15 years of no increase, in fact a decrease. So even to do the same thing you did in 2010 isn't going to cut it today. And that's why it's my understanding that Councillor Demeray had to use money out of her own pocket to go to one conference last year. And I'm sure she wouldn't want to bring that up, but I will. So to that end, I think that that we should have a fund that we all can participate in, but I think you need to put a limit on that. And if we were to strike a number, given what $17,000 was in 2010, I would suggest something more like $25,000.
You want to put that on the floor as a motion?
Yes.
Seconder? Councillor Demeray? So we've an ask to increase the conference's budget to $25,000. Seconded by Councillor Demeray. Questions to the councillors on that? Now again, it's putting it in this today doesn't mean it can't come out our next meeting, but it is getting it in there. Yes, Councillor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the other councillors. Would that be divided equally amongst all of us?
It's up for grabs.
Is it whoever?
It's a possibility. I would suggest that what we, you know.
Your microphone. Your microphone.
I would only be concerned that limiting that to if your two conferences cost, you know, if $25,000 divided by 8 is, you know, $2,500 or whatever it is, that then what would you do if yours is 28? 3 people don't go to one. Do you want to divvy $300 out of your own pocket? Or there's still $7,000 in the conference pool of money. Those are the logistics of it. I guess I was just dealing with the top number. That perhaps we could meet and
discuss it later.
Yeah.
Councillor Demeray?
Thank you. If I could just maybe speak to Councillor Beauregard's comment there, or question. Just maybe to put it in perspective, there's OSIM, which is the Ontario Small Urban Municipalities, which absolutely fits our city. There's Roma, which is the Rural Ontario Municipalities, which again absolutely fits our city. And those are really beneficial for councillors to attend, because you're going to speak with other councillors, you're going to be able to talk to the people who wrote the articles in AMO, you're going to meet with the ministers, they come out of Queen's Park and they're very good about meeting. You're going to talk to people who have had the same experiences and have found answers. So those are great for councillors to attend. Then there's AMO and FCM, which are incredibly more expensive than the other ones, and in one case there's usually a big travel piece that goes with that. And That one, though, those are really well suited to the mayor and the CAO, and certainly councillors as well. But in particular, the mayor and the CAO need to be at those ones. So it depends on what you're going to go to as to what you're going to spend. I would usually go to OSAM or Roma. Actually, going to both is an ideal situation. Always meet people, always bring a lot back to the city, and it's a good thing to do. But your days start at 7 and they don't end till 7 while you're there, because you're up for a working breakfast, you work lunch, you work your breaks, you work your supper, you do your networking afterwards, and then you hit the bed. So it's work the whole time you're there, but it's very, very beneficial. So just if it helps.
Yeah, correct, Councillor. And when you do come back, we implemented this when we were on council together. You do give a report to council and the community with regards to what went on. I know in the past, if there's been 2 or 3 of us that have gone to the same conference, we wouldn't all go to the same seminars. We would split them up, and then we would each report on those as we came back. So, right. Yeah. But and yeah, so that's yeah. Because in the past, you didn't do that. You came back and other than giving things to staff and talking amongst yourselves, but I think it's important that you tell what you did while you were gone.
I think that's a great idea, and I think we can discuss this in more detail in the future, but my concern is that maybe someone goes to 5 conferences early in the year, and then I want to go to 1 later in the year, and there's no money there.
So
that would be something that we can discuss later, but...
Correct. So I think if we can put this, if that's the dollar value, but then we revisit the policy that we have, set those parameters with regards to numbers of conferences and all the things that are attached to that, because there are per diems in there and things.
Call for conferences in January, so you list the ones you want to attend that year.
That's right. Yeah. So yeah, you'll know you know now what are coming up. There's 5. Scott's not here, but I think there's 5 out right now. OSAM. Yeah. Well, 4 in good roads. Yeah. So it's the 5 that are the main ones. But there are things. I did attend the National Arenas Conference back when we were building the Valet Center in Quebec City. Brought great information back. Actually, Paul Payton and I attended that, and we brought gobs of information back with regards to our recreation facilities. Yeah. So, but I think that policy can be done in conjunction. But in essence, you're not tying the 25,000 to anything right now. You're just saying that that's where you're going to go, and then the policy can be set by you guys.
Okay. I think information sharing is very important, and I've been in education for a very long time. I've been a student for a long time, still currently am, and so I really see the importance of it, and therefore I would be in favor of this.
Okay. All right. So with that, I have a motion on the floor, duly seconded, that the conference budget be increased to $25,000. All those in favor? All those opposed? That's carried. Okay, Peter? Anything else?
No, through you, Mr. Mayor, I've added the $16,107 to the council conference's budget to increase that to $25,000 overall.
So between now and the next meeting, I'll call the next meeting of this committee for February the 4th. Do you want to meet it, because that's an off night, you want to meet at 5:30 again? Is that fine with everybody, the 5:30 on the 4th? You're away? When are you back? Pardon? You can have her included if she's away? Oh, do it, you just want to contact everybody? Oh, we can do that, yeah, okay. So then what I'll do is I'll have Ashley contact all of us with regards to dates. Sorry, again, what day were you back?
I come back on the 6th, so I'll do that.
Okay, so, Councillor Wells.
First to the 11th, or 9th.
Okay, so the week of the 4th, really for 2 councillors is pretty much out. Yeah, yeah. So the 11th is a council meeting. 12th looks open unless it's a committee of adjustment meeting. But all right, I'll leave that up to the clerk to do. Councillor?
I have a question for Peter.
Go ahead.
Okay, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Peter. If I want to bring up a question of, let's say, the possibility of us, the city of Port Colborne, doing all the sidewalks, or a position, like a research position creating that. When would be a good time to bring that up or have that type of discussion?
Peter?
You can have that this evening, or you can have it at the next budget meeting. It can be brought up anytime during the budget process.
Okay, thank you.
You want to bring it up next budget? You want to come up?
I'll discuss it more in the next budget.
You want to discuss it with staff and then bring it forward here?
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, good, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bruno?
Reason why we haven't looked at before February 1st? Can't slip one in between now and then?
Well, so that's why I can leave it in the hands of our clerk. So she'll get out to everybody tomorrow and set some dates and go from there. All right? Peter?
As we've normally done either Monday or Wednesday, like we done this week, obviously we have a council meeting next Monday. Whether or not next Wednesday is an option is another option for council to look at. I'm not sure if there's other meetings on that Wednesday or not, next Wednesday.
The 30th? I have nothing in that evening, so.
Because basically through you, Mr. Mayor, basically the next meeting would really be discussing the capital budget, which is totally funded. So it's just a matter of, you know, if council has any concerns of any of the items, and so it could be a fairly quick meeting, the next meeting, and it's more when we into the levy part of this in the operations that it's more time consuming.
Okay, thank you, Peter. So the clerk will send out the options. Just let her know whether you can make it or not, and we'll move it from there. Other than that, any further questions? Go.
Maybe I looked through this binder and operations, our fleet that we have. I know we have many, many vehicles in the city, and I don't see anything, I don't know nothing about it hardly at all. So basically an overview of how many we have, how many do we buy every year, do we sell some, do we lease all these, or like, would help me understand the, I guess you call it the fleet, I guess, imagine, right?
Chris?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bagu. We can go into the details on that if you wish. The way the system works currently is that through the budgeting process, X amount of dollars, it's 300 and some odd thousand this year.
325.
325, and that goes into an equipment reserve. And from that reserve is what we purchase our equipment from. So we were actually going through a meeting just the other day with Community Services, and we were discussing pieces of equipment, sharing pieces of equipment. So that's a very in-depth process. We can definitely get into that if you want. But,
no, not really. Like, how about an overview?
We can do that. We can actually give you a list.
Councillor, may I suggest that you get an appointment with Chris and Paul Payton and sit down with them, and they'll give you more than an overview. That'd be great.
Happy to do that.
And anybody else can do that, but I would suggest that. Sure. It's a great way to do it.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
You're done, Peter? No further questions here. None here. Councillor Nash. Thank you, Councillor Nash. Seconder to that motion? Councillor Desmarais, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.